I wanted to put this warning right here before the opening credits of this episode. This is an incredibly long and thorough deep dive on Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. We had a lot of fun making it. We talk about a lot of things. We pick the movie to pieces, and I think it's a really good episode. But if you're not super into Harry Potter, or you're not super interested in hearing Goblet of Fire pulled apart piece by piece, strap in or skip it. It's a long, long episode. It's pushing 3 hours, as you can see. Again, I think it's a really good episode. I think we have lots of really insightful, fun, and interesting criticisms of both the movie and the book, actually. The main part of the episode is the better in the book. We had a lot of problems with the film. The better in the book segment is over an hour long. But yeah, it's just letting you know here, when letting you know what you're getting into. It's a big, long episode. We had a lot of fun making it. And if you've always wanted somebody to tear apart Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the movie, you got it. Here it is. Enjoy.
This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit.
Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, or as I like to call it, Harry Potter and the year no one got a back-to-school haircut.
And this film is lit.
Hello and welcome back to the 30th episode of This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. If you have never joined us before, if you've been joining us lately for our Harry Potter series, we want to do a quick recap of what our show actually is, because it's very different during these Harry Potter episodes. So I wanted to talk very briefly and explain what we normally do here. Normally, Katie, who, as the intro says, has an English degree, 2 English degrees specifically, she will read the book. I will not. We will both watch the movie, and then we compare, contrast, argue a little sometimes, and sort of pick apart the adaptation, how they adapted it, what the book did better, what the movie did better, all that sort of good stuff. With this Harry Potter series, it's a little different because we've both read the books before. And so I would already know what was in the book, so it wouldn't be the same idea of what we normally do. So instead, we both are just rereading the whole series, rewatching the movies together, and then comparing them. And that is our cat. And then comparing them amongst ourselves. And then we're bringing in our friend Trevor, who has never read the books, to sort of act as that other voice to offer a non-book reader perspective. So this is not normally what we do. Our segments are completely different in this Harry Potter series. We normally do a Guess Who segment, which is like a guessing game of just character descriptions from the book compared to the movie actors, and other stuff like that. So going forward, because our next episode actually will not be a Harry Potter episode.
Yeah, we're taking a short break from Harry Potter.
So we can read Order of the Phoenix, which is a long one.
Yeah.
So you'll get a feel for that. If, like I said, if you joined in on the Harry Potter series and haven't gone back and listened to old episodes, it's a little bit different. Also, while we have you here, before we get started, we would love, if you're enjoying our Harry Potter series or our podcast in general, if you can go and rate and review us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you download. I think it's available in a handful of other places, Google Play, that sort of thing. Anywhere that you listen to us and you can review us or rate us would be fantastic. Also, if you can share us on any of the social media platforms you use, if you're big on a certain subreddit that we've done a movie or a book from, go ahead and share us on there if you want. That would be awesome. Getting us out there helps. We're up to over 30 reviews on iTunes, which is really good. We were just at, I don't know, like 15 less than 6 months ago. Oh, nice. We've existed for just over a year now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, within the last 6 months, we've probably doubled our amount of reviews and ratings. So that's really exciting. But yeah, all of those really help us. and get us out there more. So thank you for everybody that listens and rates, reviews, and subscribes and suggests. That's the word, suggests us. Let's move on to Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and get 2 Muggle questions.
Muggle.
Non-magic folk.
All right, so we have a lot of them. Trevor had a lot of questions this time.
And I can see why.
Yes, because this book or this movie is very involved, and they all are from here on out because you're condensing so many pages into a 2.5-hour movie. So it's a bit of a problem, and we'll talk about it later in this episode when we sort of get into our discussion on it. But he has about 20 questions? 16 total questions. So we're going to do 4 per section here. We like to split them up so we don't just spend an hour at the beginning answering all of his questions. So let's go with Trevor's first question.
Brian Cady, hello again, and thank you for having me on This Film is Lit Harry Potter edition. Before I get into my Muggle questions, my disclaimer, I'm a casual Harry Potter fan. If I was a main hardliner Harry Potter fan, I would have read the books. So I may ask a question that is just simply dumb. If I do, tell me. I'll only cry for a while. Also, I may ask a question that'll be answered later on in the books. Totally fine as well. Just let me know that. First question, is Hogwarts and the arena for Quidditch and just the whole wizarding world like hidden from the rest of humanity, from the Muggles? Or is it potential that a Muggle just on a really long hike could stumble across Hogwarts and go, oh, what's this place?
Yes, they are hidden. No. Well, maybe, I guess a Muggle could, but probably not.
Well, they mentioned specifically in the book that if a Muggle were to approach Hogwarts, they would, or at least maybe they're talking specifically about the Quidditch field, the Quidditch World Cup, one of the two. They say they remember an errand they need to run or something they specifically need to do.
They mention a couple like Muggle repellent charms, and that's one of them. And then there's another one they mention that if they approach, I think it was Hogwarts.
That
they see like a ruin that says "Danger, keep out."
Keep out, and which to me is like, well, that wouldn't keep out like kids who like, ooh, a cool.
I feel like I know a lot of Muggles that wouldn't keep out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was like, the making them think or remember something they need to do seems more foolproof than seeing a cool old castle with a keep out sign. But
but we also find out. I think this book is the first time they mention it
because with the or no, maybe the other the unplottable.
Yeah, you can make a location unplottable.
Yeah.
In the Harry Potter universe, you can make it so that it won't appear on maps.
Which I think is funny because it's like, well, you draw the map. Like, if a Muggle doesn't know about it to draw it on a map, then it is unplottable in the sense that they won't draw it on a map. But I guess like Google Maps can't take pictures, like satellites can't take pictures. I guess so. But so there are several ways to keep Muggles from stumbling across magical areas.
In the attack on the Quidditch World Cup, why was nobody fighting back against the Death Eaters? Or did I just miss that?
Okay, so this is one of the things that the movie was missing, one of many things.
This is a big one in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of important.
Yeah.
So what the movie doesn't show is that the Death Eaters were levitating and torturing Muggles.
Yes, like a family, specifically a family of like 2 little kids and 2 parent Muggles who we even met earlier in the book, who are like the campground. Yeah,
they run the campsite.
Run the campground,
So the idea is that the Ministry wizards are having a difficult time like fighting the mob and keeping the floating Muggles from like plunging to their deaths.
Yeah. So there is Ministry in the book. It is described that the Ministry people go, like Arthur goes to try to help. Like he tells the kids to run into the woods, and then he goes to try to him and Percy and
like Bill and Charlie
all go to try to help. And like the other thing, which they don't mention, and this is better in the book, is that there are a lot, and we'll get more into depth with it there, but there are a lot of other wizards who aren't Death Eaters who start kind of joining this big mass of people, and they're trying to, and the Ministry officials, on top of not wanting to have the Muggles fall and get hurt, they're also trying to get through to the Death Eaters in the middle.
Yeah.
Because they're the main issue to some extent, which again, we'll get into a little bit more. I have that in my Better in the Book segment.
Right, and I think the idea is that it kind of has devolved into like mob rule,
right? And
at any point where you have that, your authority,
like a mob mentality.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard time getting that back under control.
Yeah, but the idea is in the book that is specifically mentioned that the Ministry does go and try. They do. It's, you don't see it as much in the movie. I mean, you kind of do in the sense that the moment where they come and try to stun Harry and them. They're trying to do something, but you don't actually see them going after the Death Eaters in the movie, which happens in the book.
How often does the Tri-Wizard Tournament take place? Does the book go into that?
All right, so the Tri-Wizard Tournament takes place every 5 years. Used to take place every 5 years.
That's what Dumbledore says.
Yes. And I don't know if they mentioned this in the movie. I can't remember specifically now if they mentioned it in the movie that it used to take place every 5 years, but it hasn't happened. It's explicitly described in the book. It hasn't happened in over 100 years. And the main reason for that is because of injuries and deaths. Specifically the death
casualty
toll.
Count was high.
The death toll got too high that they just stopped doing it. Because they thought it wasn't worth it, basically.
And I mean, you can see why, because this is supposed to be like the safe version. And they're like,
I have problems with that. Nope, not remotely. Even if you leave out the fact that Cedric ultimately dies, but that's not even because of the tournament necessarily.
Right.
Like, there's so many issues with especially the first challenge.
Yeah.
I have real big issues with, but we'll get to that later.
It looks like the other schools participating in the Tri-Wizard Tournament are not as big as Hogwarts. Is that true?
All right, final question for this segment. Are the other schools not as big as Hogwarts?
I mean, we don't know.
We assume they're around the same size.
Yeah, I would assume so.
We don't ever know exactly. Well, we know Beauxbatons is in France, we assume, because they all speak French. And we assume Durmstrang is in some sort of Scandinavian... somewhere up north.
Yeah.
And Hermione mentions it in the book because she says, well, we don't know exactly where they are, but Durmstrang students, their outfits include like furs. And when we hear them in the movie and in the book, they have Scandinavian type accents or like... almost like
an Eastern European...
yeah, Eastern European accents on their English. So yeah, they're...
So we can assume...
And Crumb plays for Bulgaria. So there you go.
So we know where roundabouts where he's from.
Since Crumb plays for Bulgaria and goes to Durmstrang.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can assume that they're around the same size. Yeah. We know Hogwarts is a really famous wizarding school. So maybe they're a little bigger. They might be bigger, yeah. But it's a little, like, deceptive the way that they show it because the two other schools only brought their shortlisted contenders.
Yeah, they don't bring their... Yeah, that's the other thing, is that they don't bring the entire school to Hogwarts. They just bring the 10 or 15 kids that could possibly
can actually compete.
Because of the age limit this year, which is,
And I would assume that they would leave back anybody who was like, nah, I don't want to.
Yeah, anybody who said they didn't want to compete. Yeah, they literally just brought... and there's a moment later where Durmstrang says Karkaroff says, hey, if we would have known that younger kids could compete after Harry gets in, he goes, we would have brought more students.
Right.
But he goes, so they only brought the people they were old enough to compete. All right, let's get into the first and the biggest segment. Because boy, do we have some issues with this movie.
How many pages is this section in our notes? It is almost all of our notes.
It's like two, three, four, five, six. 6 pages.
Yeah.
It's better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So better in the book is going to be, and this tends to be the case with these, it's a combination of things we like better in the book and problems we have with the movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hybrid, which makes sense, but... Yeah, it's a combination of kind of two segments there. So better in the book. First thing up, the Dursleys. Now they were originally we discussed this in the prequel episode, the Dursleys were going to be in this movie.
Yeah.
They were dropped because of contract disputes, essentially. They wanted more money, and they were like, fine, we'll just cut your part from the movie. But there's some really great moments in the book that I wish that are really funny and that I kind of wish would have been fun to see in the movie, which is one is Molly mailing her the invitation for the World Cup. And she sends a letter, which I think it's funny that they they can't wrap their minds around postage because they send letters all the time. I guess they just don't need stamps.
Well, they send them by owl post.
Yeah, I know.
So they have a stamp.
Yeah, so she sends the letter, and it's literally the entire letter is covered in stamps, other than the address on the front, but the rest of it is all stamps.
She wants to be sure she put enough postage on. Yeah. I mean, how would you know how much postage it takes? If you sent by owl post. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah. Another great moment is the fireplace incident. The Weasleys hook up, and they don't tell Harry they're going to do this, which was a mistake. They hook up the Dursleys to the Floo network and pop into the Dursleys' fireplace. And the Dursleys, still from the first book, have their fireplace boarded up because he boards it up in the first book so the letters can't come in through the fireplace anymore. And so all of the Weasleys are trapped. I say all, it's like Ron, Fred, George, and Arthur.
It's more than belong in a fireplace.
Are trapped, boarded into this wall, and Arthur Weasley blasts the wall out, basically.
Yeah.
And this is a great moment and like covers the Dursleys in like plaster and dust, and you know, because Petunia is notoriously anal about how she keeps everything super clean, especially with visitors coming. So that's another fun moment. And then another one that you put here.
The Tongue Toffee.
Yes. So the Fred and George pranksters, obviously, but they're sort of, this is the beginning of their business ventures.
Their business venture to sell prank items.
Yeah, and so they developed a candy that makes your tongue grow incredibly large.
Yeah.
If you eat it. And also, Harry has mentioned to them that Dudley is on a diet. He's been on a diet all summer because he's gotten too big. And so they bring candy and accidentally, quote unquote, drop it on the ground, knowing Dudley will eat it. And then there's just a great, one of the specific moment that I thought would be hilarious that I wish was in the movie is that they all realize what happened, but Petunia is like losing her mind and trying to rip his tongue out of his mouth because she doesn't realize it's his tongue. She doesn't realize what's happened. So there's a line about her trying to yank his tongue out of his mouth, and Arthur's there trying to like sort this all out.
He's trying to like make everything better. And like kind of the moment that I wanted to see too was Uncle Vernon just throwing
china at him or whatever it is.
Little like tchotchkes and things at him.
Yeah. And Arthur just exasperated trying to solve the situation, and he just tells them to leave, and then he takes care of it.
Yeah.
And all the kids go back in the fireplace. But
the movie skips all of that.
Yes.
And we
just jump directly into Harry.
We get Harry's initial dream where he dreams about Voldemort in the old Riddle House.
Yeah.
And then we go right into they're at the Weasleys getting ready for the World Cup.
Going to the World Cup. Which leads to?
Amos Diggory?
Yeah.
Amos, I pictured douchier looking than he is in the movie.
Because he's such a douche to Harry?
He is such a douche to Harry, but in the movie he kind of looks like a bird watcher.
Yeah.
Like he a little bit weird, but like essentially harmless.
It's pretty close to what I imagined. Because his douchiness isn't from, I don't know, it's just, he's so like over the moon for his son and like so proud of his son. Because his son is a prefect and, you know, like the best Hufflepuff student, like in the last 10 years or whatever. That it's just, that's where all of his pride and sort of douchiness comes from. Not because he's like a cool guy.
His son who randomly drops down out of a tree.
Yeah, when they first run into him in the movie, I was like, wait, was he up in a tree?
What was he doing?
All right.
Practicing for Twilight.
Leading to, they then take the portkey to the Quidditch World Cup because they have to take the portkey because the kids can't apparate and they won't want people flying in brooms everywhere over they get there. So they take a portkey, which is basically just sucks you from one place to the other. And in the book, it's described, it yanks you and you feel like a yank in your stomach and then it pulls you through. I think the effect looks pretty cool in the movie.
Yeah.
But when they land, in the book, it's described that they all fall on the ground except for Arthur, Amos, and Cedric, who land on their feet, like when they get there. The movie chose to portray this by having them float down, waggling their legs. They're like running through the air.
Run on air to get down to the ground.
Yeah, and so clearly look like they're on cables. Like it's so clearly like they're on cable harnesses. It looks really dumb. And I was like, why?
Like,
why?
One, whose decision was that? Two, why? Surely the older Weasley kids, like Fred and George, would know how to do that.
I don't think they do in the book. Because they don't take they always just take the Floo Network places.
I guess.
And the whole thing with Cedric, the reason he is done it, I don't know if he's done it before, but he's like such a perfect physical specimen is the idea. No, really, truly. Is to sort of illustrate his physical prowess is that he lands on his feet. Like he's got great balance. Yeah,
sure,
that's what it is. And that's setting up sort of Cedric's character, because we never really met Cedric. We met him in the previous book as the Seeker, but we didn't really learn much about him. So I believe that's why none of the other ones
the running on air things.
The running on air
stupid.
Really dumb. Really, really dumb. I love, and they skip it in the movie because the tent's already set up when they get there, but they get to the campground and Arthur is super excited about using a hammer and stakes and tent poles and put up a tent. And I just love the idea of seeing him like...
Putting up a tent is such a nightmare.
It is.
It's like a nightmare task.
It's terrible, or it can be. And I just wish we would have seen Arthur having so much fun with it.
So they get to the Quidditch World Cup, and they're like going up to their seats, which are really high up.
Yeah,
and they see the Malfoys, who don't miss the opportunity to jab at them because they're sitting in seats that are high up, and the Malfoys are in the minister's box.
Yeah.
But
this is in the movie.
This is in the movie because, well, they won in the book. They are also in the minister. They're all in the minister's box.
Yeah, Arthur pulls a favor basically with one of the ministry people he's friends with to get them tickets in the
in box seats, basically.
Yeah, in the primo box.
Yeah, and two, I could be wrong here.
You're not wrong about this.
But don't you want higher seats for Quidditch? It all takes place in the air.
Yeah, I could see the slight point of wanting... There's whatever level the hoops are at, which I think are 50 feet high. I think is where they are, like how high the scoring hoops are. You'd want to be about that height.
Sure, yeah.
So I could see... If you were all the way if the stands are 200 feet tall and you're at 200 feet in the air and the hoops are at 50 feet, most of the action's going to take place in that, but not all of it. You'd definitely be better being at 100 feet than you would be being on the ground, I feel.
Right. I would rather be like looking down and watching them play than like staring upwards.
It's not an insult that makes a lot of sense because the best seats generally from what we see in the books are the high seats because you're up there where it's happening.
It makes sense as an insult in regard to how we perceive sports in our world.
When they're all played on the ground.
But it doesn't make any sense when you put it into the context of the world of the story.
No. It's really silly. But they just had to reintroduce, look, the Malfoys are mean.
They're rich and they're mean.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's what it's there for. It's a reminder, they're rich, they're mean. In case you forgot or haven't seen the first 3 movies.
And then Fudge in the movie announces himself as Minister for Magic.
Yeah, I feel like that happened several times.
And that was a little thing that I caught, and I was like, what are you actually talking about? Minister for Magic?
Yeah, Minister of Magic, but sure. So then we skip the World Cup.
Yeah.
It starts...
and then we go right into the riot.
Oh, and also this here, and I didn't think I wrote it down, but this is where we realize we're not getting Ludo Bagman. Yeah. Not that he's super important necessarily, but he is an interesting character.
Yeah.
And then he has a red herring storyline with the Weasleys that we think might be going somewhere in the book. And he's the announcer for the World Cup because he's a former Quidditch champion player for England. And he's the one who does the announcing. And in this, we see that it's Fudge that... or at least starts it. We don't see the match to know if there is an announcer or not. But we actually get the play out of the World Cup in the book, like what happens, like a play-by-play, basically.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. One of the things it skips that I really like is when they show the
Vila?
Yes. Well, and the mascots for each country, because it's Bulgaria versus Ireland, and so the Vila come out for Bulgaria, and they're not even in the movie at all. It's not mentioned.
They erase that entire
And the Vila are like this race of like, I assume race is the right word. I don't.
They're like almost like species. Sirens.
Yes, they're gorgeous women.
Yeah, but they're not like water-based.
No, yeah, but they're like gorgeous blonde, silver-haired women who like entrance men, but then also when they get upset, turn into like monsters, kind of.
Yeah, they turn into like harpy,
banshees or whatever. Yeah, and so they're the mascots for Bulgaria, and there's some fun with that. And then the leprechauns, who we do see in the movie, kind of with the big leprechaun.
Yeah, there's like a brief shot of them.
And at one point they end up fighting because there's a whole. So the game gets out of hand at one point, and there starts a fight between the mascots where the leprechauns are like flipping off the Vila, and then the Vila are throwing fireballs at the leprechauns, and it's like that would have been really awesome to see.
Yeah,
just a brief moment of it, like a quick montage of action from the World Cup, and like just some of that nonsense little like just a quick few seconds of beautiful women hurling fireballs at leprechauns, just so people were like, what was that? If they hadn't read the book. And just for the rest of us, so we really enjoy. But yeah,
we lose a lot by cutting that World Cup like almost entirely out. We lose. I mean, the Vila and the Leprechaun, I guess, is kind of a smaller.
It's a little thing, but it's just a fun thing.
We also lose, like you said, Ludo Bagman and Winky the house elf. Yeah. Which has like a domino effect of consequences.
Well, here's what they did: is they went this is the big change they made, and it comes around here where we can talk about it, is that they axe Winky.
Yeah.
And they completely change the elements of how Barty Crouch Jr. incorporates into. I mean, it's still similar.
It's similar, but like they change. I mean, I guess we're to assume he broke himself out of Azkaban.
Yes, because they drop the whole element of him being his dad saving him from Azkaban, essentially.
Like smuggling him
out because his mom and Barty Crouch Sr.'s wife was so sad and she was also dying. There's a whole storyline with that that is interesting. And so, yeah, we have to assume he just broke out of Azkaban.
Yeah.
Which is a little interesting because the whole point is that the only person who's ever done it was one Sirius did it because the whole animagus thing, being a dog, as he explains in the third book. I don't know if he explains it in the movie now. I already forgot. But he broke out, and then we have the future breakout of the Lestranges and the other few people. Yeah. But that's because at that point Voldemort's reached his power, and the Dementors essentially let him out, I think, is the idea. If I remember, again, we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, so they have to skip Winky, which means that changes the entire...
But changes the entire
the Dark Mark
subplot with... Yes, the Dark Mark chapter and the entire subplot with Hermione and
there's no House Elf Liberation Front, which is important.
We lose that, which is super important in building like thematic elements further on down the line.
They dropped a lot of the really important themes about same thing when they get rid of and we'll talk about this. I have it here actually coming up very, very soon about dropping the Muggles from we'll get there in 2 seconds. So let's just get this next 2 point real quick. So they changed, and we're going to discuss it throughout this because it's such a big change. How they changed the whole Winky, Barty Crouch, all of that is so completely different to how it is in the book. And here's what I'll say, and I have this in a later segment. But I'll talk about it here. I really like how the book does it. I like the mystery of it. I like that it is really convoluted and I don't want to say convoluted because it sounds negative, but complicated.
Yeah, there's a lot of players on the chessboard.
Where Barty Crouch is invisible in the press box and steals Harry's wand and uses Harry's wand to cast a dark mark in the sky, whereas in the movie it's just Barty with his own wand doing it. And then they think, well, where did it... Because they find the wand and they do Priori Incantatem, which is an important element for later, so we know what that is when it happens at the end of the movie / book, which they don't explain in the movie at all, which is very confusing if you've not read the book. And so you see that, and then there's some conflict between the mistrust between ministry officials and Harry and what he's doing. That even sets up at the beginning of the book there. And then not having Winky in means we don't have Dobby in, which means we don't have the whole house elf element in, which is important for the other things. So yeah, it just changes a lot, and we'll probably touch on it numerous times throughout, but it's kind of crazy. I liked him more this time, but I still didn't love the Death Eater robes and mask design.
It's very clannish.
Which I get. I get. To me, it just looks a little silly. They're almost a little too tall. The hoods are a little too tall and like pointy.
They're almost more like dunce caps.
Yes. Like they just needed to be a little shorter. I know, like I said, yes, they're definitely going for a clan type.
Oh yeah, that's for sure the look they're trying to evoke there, which is not incorrect.
No, and it's not a bad idea. I'm just saying I wish they'd done it slightly differently, because to me the hoods are a little too tall, and I think they dropped the hoods though somewhat in later movies, if I remember correctly, because I think other people were like, that looks kind of silly. I don't hate the masks as much, but I still don't love them. They're kind of just like skull masks. They're kind of cool, I guess. I just wish they didn't look like bones. I wish they were like, I don't know, more fantasy looking, like they were like white or something. I don't know, instead of just looking like actual skulls. But they're all right. I didn't hate them as much as I remembered hating them, but I really don't like the big conical tall dunce hats.
It's a look.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is. And again, we get what they're going for with the sort of symbolism they're evoking, and it works. It's just not the best execution, in my opinion. So then, what we discussed earlier, the juggling of the Muggles, the Muggle juggle.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I think was really a mistake to drop that.
Yeah.
Now, I get that they probably felt like they didn't have time to introduce the Muggles beforehand, so we would know that they were Muggles, because you have to set that up, because we get introduced in the book.
Right, because if we don't know they're Muggles, we might think they're wizards.
Why are they? Yeah, who are these people getting tossed around in the air? But it really illustrates a level of cruelty that isn't in the movie. Just having them kind of storm around and burn tents down.
Like, it's still a bad situation,
but it's not cruel and like, and it doesn't get to the theme of inequality and sort of superiority and weird, and if you're evoking the clan, the sort of idea that these people feel they are superior to these other people.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's a problem, because you can't evoke something like that in look and in aesthetic without addressing the deeper issues behind it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then, I mean, they do touch on it, obviously, throughout. We see Draco constantly and people saying, oh, mudbloods and Muggles suck, and who cares about Muggles, and we killed those Muggles, but we never really see it. We see, obviously, in the beginning of this one, we see them kill Fred, but that's just because he walked in on their plan more than anything, not because he's a Muggle that we're aware of. Like, if a wizard had walked in on Voldemort, he would have killed him too. I mean, maybe they would have tried to get information out of him like they do with Bertha Jorkins, who is also not in this movie. Who was an important character in the book. But yeah, so not having them not showing them torturing Muggles, it completely cuts like we said, the whole point of what you're setting up with this group of wizards who feel they're superiors to quote unquote humans, being non-magic humans. When you don't have that, it's just like, okay, they're bad, they're lighting stuff on fire, fine. And then another big thing, and they kind of show this, I think, but it's hard to tell because the way the way the whole Death Eater thing is shot is so chaotic. Yeah, and we only really get a minute or so of it. And we only kind of see some vague quick shots of people in hoods and the masks and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's made very clear in the book, and I think this is really important because the fascist overtones of this chapter in particular really stood out to me in a way in the current time period that didn't strike me as a 12-year-old when I read, or whatever, as a 14-year-old when I read this, when we didn't have a readily available counter or representation in modern society. Real world modern representation. But other wizards that aren't the Death Eaters start joining in with the mob. Yeah, just like your average normal bystander wizard joins in, starts walking around with the Death Eaters and like laughing and like, this is fun, and they see what is happening. They're aware that these Muggles are, and we say torturing, they're not like using Crucio on them, but they are like flipping them around in midair and like making their like the one of them's like the mom, they're like making her dress fall down and like really awful stuff. And it's really important to set up that implication of that it's not just Death Eaters. Like, next to you. It's not a select group of people that are evil, that are being evil. Yes. This is a societal ill. This is a societal problem. And this, again, these themes come back more and more and more, and they completely cut the House Elf Liberation Front, which is a super important, if not pivotal to the story, obviously. It's like a very not important to the actual story of the book, but it is super important to the whole point of what the books are trying to get across. Yeah. And it's sort of anti-fascist. It's super important to the overall message of this series. Yeah. But the movie says to hell with that. Yeah. Basically. And again, what are you going to do when you're going to cut, when you decide you're going to make it one movie? Yeah. You have to cut the things that you feel like aren't as important to the story, and that I mean it is. I think it's more important in the sense that it is the whole point of like the series to some extent. I mean, I
I would honestly love to see these remade as a TV series.
I think everything should be remade as a TV series, though. You won't get any argument from me. Movies are dead.
I mean,
TV
like,
is where it's at.
if the right company or production house could just get a hold of it.
Yeah. You'll get zero argument from me. I think everything should be TV, though. So
yeah. Well, it would make this a little harder, though.
Yeah, it would. It would. So yeah, that was a big one for me. Not having them torturing Muggles is a big mistake.
Yeah.
And then on that note, as we talked about earlier, the House Elf Liberation Front, SPEW, whatever, it changes names several times. Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare or something, I think. Anyways, it changes several times. It's Hermione's group that she starts because she's outraged. She was kind of unaware of house elves, and that's sort of what their whole thing was until this one, where she sees Winky and how mean and cruel Barty Crouch Sr. is to Winky.
And this is the first time we've encountered house elves other than Dobby.
Yes.
And we come to understand that Dobby is kind of an anomaly.
An anomaly in that he wanted to be free and wants his freedom and has terrible quote unquote owners.
Yeah.
Whereas from here on out, most of the house elves we see like being...
Right, they like
in the sense that they are conditioned to being servants, slaves, essentially, to wizards.
Yeah.
But Hermione, this blows Hermione's mind because she's smart and woke and is like, this is a problem. What is wrong with all of you? These are living, thinking, feeling, emotional, these are people.
And they have their own magic, too.
Yeah. They are essentially just other creatures that are on the same level as humans, just slightly different. And I think it does explore some really important themes that, again, are also very timely currently, because Hermione is pushing this very I want quote unquote radical. It's not really radical, but in the sense that she is like, we have to do something about this.
Right.
This is nonsense.
It's radical in the sense that none of the other wizards think it's a problem.
Yeah. They're all just sort of like, yeah, it's just how it is.
Because that's the way it's always been.
That's the way it's always been. They're happy. It's fine. It's whatever, And I think, especially that's exemplified in the relationship between her and Ron to it, because Ron and Harry both kind of, I don't know Ron as much because he's from an old wizarding family where this has just always been the case. Harry agrees. I think in principle, Harry's like, yeah, but at the same time, he's sort of indifferent to it. He's like, because to be fair, they're teenagers and it's,
and also to be fair, Harry's got a lot on his plate.
But very few of the other wizards that Hermione runs into are remotely interested in her pushing this thing. And I think it really illustrates this idea of sort of pushing and continuously pushing for social change versus this indifferent, moderate, it's fine. Everything's fine. Why are you making waves? And I think that's an important, it's an important element of the story that is lacking in the movie because they cut that completely. Yeah. And I think it's also very relevant to our current society and some of the arguments people get in online. There's a really fun little short scene of Stan Shunpike flirting with Avila. Just a little callback. It would not need to be in the movie.
But it would have been funny.
Yeah.
But then we would have had to have the Vila.
Yeah.
I remember seeing this for the first time and being disappointed with the way that the dark mark looked.
I don't love it, but I don't hate it.
I never pictured it it looks like 3D and kind of odd to me.
It's like clouds. It's like smoke. Whereas I always imagined it, because I think they describe it, I'd have to go back and double check, but I think they describe it as like stars.
Almost like a constellation.
Yeah, it comes up like stars. Whereas this, it comes out kind of like smoke or something, which it looks neat. I don't hate it, and I actually don't hate it being 3D. I agree, I never imagined it being 3D, but I think the way the tongue moves and stuff, I think it looks kind of cool. I didn't really have a big problem with it.
They also, in that scene in the movie, when Harry sees the dark mark, his scar hurts, which I'm pretty sure does not happen in the book. We're going to double check it.
Harry's scar does not hurt.
No, right. Which makes sense because Voldemort isn't nearby or doing anything particularly murderous at that moment that we know of, which is when his scar hurts. Yeah. So, why would it hurt just seeing... There's numerous
issues with the dark mark and his scar.
Right. I have numerous issues with the way that this movie in particular ignores the lore,
the rules of the universe,
rules of the universe for this series. Anyway,
and the Harry Potter universe, the universe J.K. Rowling sets up does have pretty reliable and strict rules. Yeah. Even in a world of magic, the rules make sense and stay the same mostly. There's an occasion.
There's blips here or there, which fair. It's hard to invent a whole entire world. There's gonna be little holes here and there. Yeah. But for the most part, this world has very clear rules. Yeah. And those rules are set up in those movies.
This movie specifically just kind of like kind of wings it because they had to cut so much and they're trying to incorporate different elements here and there and they incorporate it very sloppily at times. I have this in better in the book. I think it's just more realistic. You have it in a later segment, and I don't disagree because I think it fits in both. But when we finally get and meet both the schools, they are Durmstrang and Beauxbatons, as they say in the movie. I always said Beauxbatons.
So did but
whatever. They're both they have boys and girls. They're not just like an all boys school for Durmstrang and an all girls school.
Although, do we ever see any female characters from Durmstrang? But also, while we're on the subject, that weird like dance, pause and sigh thing that that the Beauxbatons girls do. Like, what is that about? Movie?
It doesn't. They're flirty or something. Like, I don't know.
Which doesn't even like if the movie had set up villas,
right? Which it doesn't, because that's a whole other thing. Is that Fleur is a part villa.
Yeah,
Fleur Delacour
she's like
part
1/4 villa, but the movie doesn't do that. So then, like, it almost sets it up like it's some kind of weird charm school or something.
Yeah. I'm not sure, just to go back on it real quick, I'm not sure that the book ever does specifically mention whether or not Durmstrang has
female students.
Girls, but doesn't say they don't either.
Fair enough.
I don't think it's mentioned. At least I couldn't find it. So, Mundungus Fletcher gets a mention in this book, who becomes a somewhat important minor character in 5 and 6.
Yeah, he's like a somewhat important like minor pawn type character later.
Yeah. And I think he just gets dropped. I could be wrong. It's been so long since I've seen 5, 6, 7 movies. I think he might just get dropped completely from the movie series. I wouldn't be surprised. But he gets a name drop kind of just as one of those little J.K. Rowling. Yeah. Here's a thing, remember it. Or don't forget about it and then remember.
Here's the thing, this will come back later.
Yeah, this will come back in a book. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Moody's Eye.
I hate Moody's Eye in the movie. I always have. I always will. It looks stupid and it looks fake. And why does it have a mechanical zoomy zoom feature?
That's my biggest problem, is the mechanical zoom that it does. So the book, it's very explicitly a magical eye. Yeah. It would not make, in the movie, it makes a mechanical zooming noise, like on a video camera. Like,
yeah, we like see it. They show it from his perspective a couple of times, and it makes like a noise, and I'm like, what?
And it's not mechanical, it's magical, so why would it make a weird and I just mechanical noise?
I always hated that they like strap it to his head with
why they did that
thing.
I don't hate the way that looks. I always thought that was dumb because it's not how it's described in the book. In the book, it is definitely what I imagine. He just has a slightly larger, normal.
It's like an enchanted eyeball.
Yeah, but it's not like It's not like an eye patch situation type thing. Yeah. The reason they did that is to me it looks like a practical moving eye. It's not like CG, so it's like a mechanical, remote controlled little eye mechanic in there, and so they needed something to be able to put that on his face.
No, I get it from an effects standpoint, and that was always kind of what I assumed was the reason. I just think it looks dumb.
I appreciate it in the sense that they wanted to do it and have it be physical and not be just a CG eyeball, because that potentially could look weird. And so I appreciate what they were going for, and I thought they did it in a way that kind of worked. They just should have made it not like a weird mechanical noises. I would have liked it the way I imagined it in the book, but for what they were going for and with doing it practically, I thought they did an okay job with it, relatively speaking.
I don't know. This is kind of a little thing, but it always bugged me when Moody demonstrates the unforgivable curses for them in the movie, the Imperious Curse like makes the spider float around the room.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's supposed to be like another spell that he's
I think it's
doing?
supposed to be the Imperious Curse, but it's not how the Imperious Curse works from how we understand it. In the movie, he like everywhere he points his wand, the spider just kind of flies around.
Yeah.
But that's not in the book and in the movie ultimately, like with Crumb, like it's basically just mind control. Like you get somebody with it and you can make them do
you make them like a puppet basically.
And you can make them do things that they couldn't physically do, but not like fly. Like there's a line about Neville doing like backflips or handsprings or something like that because this is they don't do in the movie, which I thought was a little disappointing in the book. Although I have my own issues with it in the book. In the book, Crouch Moody uses the Imperious Curse on the students to like train them how to resist it, basically. And there's some really fun scenes or interesting scenes with that of like Harry is able to throw it off completely. And I was like, despite Crouch being a terrible person and being bringing Voldemort back and all, he gives them a pretty good fucking training.
He does. I mean, yeah, for all that, he gives them a pretty solid year of education.
He really does, and I was blown away. I'm like, he's doing a really good job preparing all these kids to fight against Voldemort in a year, a couple of years from now. Like, this is the best Defense Against the Dark Arts class they have ever had. Hell, he gives, and I had it in a later note, but he gives Harry the idea to be an Auror.
Yeah.
He's like, Potter, you should become an Auror.
He's a method actor.
Yeah, Crouch, yeah.
So he got really into the Moody role.
I was just like, he literally gives Harry and Hermione the idea. I think Hermione ultimately doesn't become an Auror. I can't remember from Cursed Child, but I can't write. It always comes up. But yeah, he gives Harry the idea to become an Auror, and I was like, man, you really, like, I get that you're deep cover, but like, you didn't have to be that good at your job. Right? You didn't have to like get all these kids ready to defeat you in battle like 2 years from now. So Fred and George, when they put their name in the goblet, that scene's in the movie because they think they can trick Dumbledore's age line with a aging potion because they're only like a month or two young or something like that. They're both like turned 17 in a month. So they use a little bit of potion. And in the movie, it's portrayed that they jump in across the line and nothing happens. And they're like, yeah. And then they put their names in the goblet. And then the goblet's like, nope, screw you.
And I have a huge problem with that. Because that's not how it works.
That's not the point. That's not how it works. It's like movie. You didn't pay attention to what, like...
Right. We're ignoring the rules that have already been established. Because if it's the cup that rejects Fred and George for being too young, then why would it accept Harry's name?
Yeah. I mean, you could kind of hand wave it away with that... Crouch bamboozled it so hard that it didn't even realize that he was too young, but that's not what happens. The idea is that the reason the line is there
is to keep anyone under 17 from crossing.
Yes, because if you did get to the cup and get your name in, it would pick, like, because it doesn't have the implication I got from the book is the cup doesn't have any rules about age. Right. This is the same cup they've been using forever.
And this is the first time they've had an age limit.
Yeah, the age limit is exclusively imposed by Dumbledore and the Ministry and all that, and so the age line that Dumbledore draws is the thing that keeps that from happening. If you somehow did manage to bamboozle the age line, you could put your name in the goblet and it might pick you.
Yeah.
Is how it plays in the book. But yeah, they put their name in the movie and then they get kicked out. And then they start fighting with each other, which, whatever, it's not the worst thing in the world. But I like in the book, everybody starts laughing at them because they grow beards. And then Fred and George, being the jokesters and the fun-loving guys they are, just start laughing at each other and themselves.
Which makes way more sense.
Which makes way more sense than them like wrestling and like, oh, you said it would work. Oh, it's like, all right. Okay, 2 pages out of 60.
Strap in,
kids. Boy, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. I'm not even gonna try to do that accent from the Shrunken Head from the third.
Oh, God. Just put the clip in.
Yeah. No, don't tell me. It's gonna take too long to edit already. Stop adding things. So when we do meet Victor Crumb eventually in the movie, I never envisioned him from his description in the book, and I think this is explicitly the point and on purpose. He's in the movie. He's a very handsome man.
Oh, yeah,
he's like a model.
He's pretty cute.
And and very like stoic and like badass and like, you know, when he walks into the hall, he's like, like when he walks into the Great Hall when they're introduced or whatever, he's like very imposing.
Yeah.
And that is the opposite of his description in the book. He's only imposing when he's on the broom. He's only impressive when he's playing Quidditch. He's kind of like, they describe him as like duck-footed and slouchy and like not particular. Like the drawing of him, he's not particularly. There's a picture heading of the chapter, and he's not particularly handsome.
Yeah, and they don't describe him as particularly handsome either. No. They say he has like a
big nose
and like really sallow skin, and he's kind of on the skinny side.
Yeah, like he's kind of small and he's not imposing, but he's just really good at Quidditch. And that's why everybody is attracted to him, because the girls do fawn all over him in the book like they do in the movie. But it's not because he looks like a supermodel. It's because he's the best Quidditch player in the world. He's
famous and he's talented.
And he's very talented. And also, and so I thought that was I mean, I guess I get what they were going for. And then also it helps to sell tickets to maybe if you...
Yeah.
Ooh, Crumb's so handy. I don't know. But you know, or posters or something. Who knows?
I had actually a similar but kind of opposite thought about Fleur. Because, and I guess it doesn't really matter since they never set up the thing about the Vila, so she's not a Vila in the movie. But the actress who plays her is very pretty.
Yeah, it's Clemence Posey. I think that's her name.
But in the book, she's like otherworldly.
Well, yeah, because she's part Vila. Yeah. She's like legitimately like. Her hair is like silver, I think they say, or it's blonde, but it's like silvery blonde, and she's described as like otherworldly beautiful, and she's just pretty in the movie. She also doesn't talk like ever, which she does in the book a lot more. Well, they kind of
assassinated her character, but we'll get there.
Later. Yeah. I wish they'd included Ron having the mini Crumb figurine, just because I thought that would have been interesting.
Yeah,
it would have been even just an easy little thing to add, because when they go to the Quidditch World Cup, Ron buys a little miniature walking. Mm-hmm. I guess it talks. I don't know. Miniature of Victor Crumb, which I think would be interesting to have that end moments. And there's a moment too later when after Crumb goes to the ball with Hermione, Harry finds like the broken in half arm of the Victor Crumb figurine laying under Ron's bed. Yeah.
Can the figurine feel that?
I don't know, but I wish they'd included it, because it's just a little thing that I thought was really interesting and fun, because I love we'll get to it, but there's some other mini things that I thought were really good. Okay, the big moment that everybody talks about.
I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this.
No, everybody has broken this down.
But we have to at least mention it. The most egregious misdelivery of a line, possibly of all time.
Yes. In an adaptation, at least, of the book, I can't even do it justice. This one I'll put in.
Yeah, just put it in. Just put it in.
Harry, you put your name in a goblet of fire.
He asked calmly after that line that you just heard.
He like flies across the room and tries to strangle him.
I remember seeing that in theaters and being like, one of the first times in my life realizing that I understood characterization and was like, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. That Dumbledore would never do that. Like, what? Like, it doesn't fit him at all.
But I mean, it's another way that this movie, by and large, ignores what the books have already created. Like, not just the rules of the universe, but very well established characterizations.
Yes. Yeah, and even within like I said, it was in the book. It says, he asked calmly. Like that.
Yeah, it's literally the same line, just calm.
Yeah, you literally, the word for the exact same line. And there's a million internet memes about it because everybody agrees. But it's just, wow, it is really interesting that they would fail. And that mainly falls on the director. I mean, the actor, the director has the say in that.
Yeah.
There are so many people involved that could have been like, do it like that, like, or because I would imagine the director said, no, I want energy, I want fear from you, I want
fire,
anger,
I want passion. Okay, all right.
Because I think a lot of people put that on Mike, and I understand why, because he's not Richard Harris, he's not our Dumbledore, but so a lot of people put that on Michael Gambon, but I don't think that's on him. I think he does a relative from these 3 and 4 that we've watched now. Going back and rewatching them, I think overall he does a pretty good Dumbledore. I just think there are moments that are off.
Yeah.
Like there are just moments that are off.
Yeah.
And I really think Richard Harris, had he's even been alive for the later ones, I think he would have had a tough time doing the fiery business Dumbledore because he was as old as he was. I think it would have been tough for Richard Harris to pull off the Dumbledore we see in the final chapter of this book or in the next book and the 6th book. Like, that would have been tough for him. So I think it was kind of... I think Gambon does an okay job, but boy, some of those moments.
Well, no, and I think you're right. I think that falls more on the shoulders of the director, because even if he had done it that way initially, Michael Gambon, the director, should have been like, let's reel it back.
Well, and the way it's shot, there's no way that the actor could have just done that.
Yeah.
Because it's shot in a way that the camera moves with them. Like, that was planned. Like, that, the movement and the yelling, and that was all, you can't just, that's not a surprise thing. That's not like a slight inflection difference in how you're, you know what I mean? Like, that's a known quantity, the way they filmed it. So that was the director, how the director wanted it.
So there you go. That's our take on the most contentious
of all the Harry Potter movie moments, maybe. I think there's worse moments in this movie, honestly. Well, there's not worse. There's a dumber moment in this movie. It's just that's, as far as character-wise goes, that's pretty stupid. So Sirius, when he sticks his head in the fireplace and talks to Harry, it looks kind of cool in this movie, I think.
I see what they were going for with, like, trying to make it look like the coals.
The coals, and they change it in a later movie. They change the visual look in the next one. I just explicitly remember they changed how it looks. I don't remember what they changed it to. But the thing I thought was interesting, but I don't like it overall in the movie. I don't like it either. At all. I think it looks kind of interesting, but it's not what it's not what I imagined. 2, I think it changes. Not only not what I imagined, it changes the performance of the scene in a very strange way. So the way I always imagined it from the book, basically the head just appears in the fire, and this actually isn't the first time we see this happen. It happens in the 3rd or even earlier in this book.
It happens earlier in this book.
That one of the other ministry officials, Amos Diggory, sticks his head, shows up in the Weasley's fireplace at the Burrow, and it's described as just a head floating in the fire, basically. Right. Like, I always imagined it as just their head floating in the flames, kind of. Just like magically floating in the flames. And part of the reason is because in the scene with Amos Diggory, Molly Weasley grabs toast in tongs and sticks it in his mouth.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great moment. And he takes the toast with him as he goes. So I always imagine basically is you take flue powder, you throw it in the fire, and then you stick your head in.
I think that is because we see Harry do that in
that is
book
right. We
5,
do see it later, don't we?
I think. So I'm pretty sure that is the way that works. But yeah, I really did not enjoy the coal face.
No. Well, and here's the thing about me, or to me, that really bothers me is that it changes Sirius's delivery because they made it like this weird strained thing where he's like, Harry.
Yeah, they made it
like, it's so weird.
Like, it almost sounds like they wanted it to sound like he was trying to talk with coals in his mouth.
Yeah, and it changes the delivery of all the lines in a weird way and I guess part of it was on purpose because it sounds slightly more sinister, and he is telling Harry, like, Karkaros was a Death Eater, blah, 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 kind of sinister stuff. Like, you got to look out, but it feels...
It feels odd, and a big issue that I have with the way that whole thing was presented is that it makes it hard for you to tell that it's serious.
Yeah, like,
it doesn't really look like him, and it doesn't sound like him at all.
No, and it is because Harry got the note, but if you miss the note somehow of him saying,
you'd be
meet
like,
me in the fire.
Who is this?
Yeah.
Who is this fireplace demon?
All right. So you have this. I disagree.
So the ferret scene in the movie,
it happens at a completely different part.
It does. It happens at a completely different time, but I don't think it was as good as it was in the book. And part of that, I think, was because he wasn't actually slamming.
He wasn't bouncing. But that, you know why that's for, is because the PETA people, for animal rights people being.
Yeah, I get it.
No, I get
it.
But yeah,
was that a real ferret?
No, but regardless, I think regardless, the idea of, and I can understand it. It could be upsetting, even if it's clearly it's a CG ferret, but seeing a CG ferret bouncing off the pavement squeaking to kids, I could see being upsetting, and I'm not necessarily sure I would want to see it. It in the context of what's happening, you get it, and it's not really, it's Malfoy and it's not really hurting him, but like, I mean, it kind of is, but like he's Malfoy, he fucking deserves it. But like, yeah, I can see why they changed it, and I actually have this in a later segment because I thought they did a pretty good job with it.
Fine. I just like it in the book better. And another thing that I liked in the book better about that scene was that Moody specifically mentions that he knows Malfoy's father. And
he says it in the movie.
Does he say it in the movie?
They take a line that Rita Skeeter says.
Oh, about making his hair curl.
About Ludo Bagman. In the book, she says that to somebody, Hermione or somebody, about Rita says, I know things about Ludo Bagman that can make your hair curl or something. Not that it needs it or something like that. I think she says it to Hermione. And they give it to Moody, and he says that to Malfoy. As he's turning away, he said, and it might be like an 80-yard line because you don't really see him say it. He just goes, I know things about your dad that would make your hair curl or skin, whatever.
But I think it was better in the book.
I don't disagree.
He says like, I know your father of old.
Yeah.
Or something. And then he also, when this says the head of house is Snape, he says like, oh, another old friend.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. There are little parts of it in the book that are missing in the movie that are really good, but I thought the scene overall, we'll talk about later. I thought it.
Okay.
Hermione, they completely cut this, and I think I know why. But in the book, there's a moment where there's a confrontation between Draco and Harry and Ron, and Hermione's there, and they try to curse. Harry and Draco try to curse each other, and they like bounce off the. It doesn't even remember. But anyways, Hermione gets hit in the face with a Engorgio spell, and her teeth start blowing up really big. Yeah.
Her front teeth, which are already established as rather large. They're
large to begin with, yeah. They're as described in the book. They're not in the movie.
Right.
Really, like Emma Watson's teeth are not particularly
They're pretty
large.
normal.
They're pretty, average sized. But in the book, they're described as big to begin with. And they start blowing up really, really big. And then Snape's ridiculously cruel, which we're going to have to ultimately talk about Snape. Rereading this, I have real issues with Snape. I don't like him anymore.
Snape.
I have real problems with.
I don't know if this is the right place to really get into Snape. No, it's not. But Snape, now that the series is over, has been romanticized.
Yes, in a way that is problematic.
Way that is very problematic.
Holy
because
shit!
He's
an abuser.
He is unbelievably cruel to a group of children.
Yes, it is. Ridiculous. Yeah, the romanticization, that might be the biggest crime of this fucking series, is that Snape has been turned into this like superhero.
Yeah.
He is not. He's a selfish asshole, like, who just did the right thing because he fucking loved a woman. Like, okay, it's not the place, but we need to get into that.
I think we're better served discussing that more later
time,
but
maybe in like a prequel episode or something.
He is unbelievably cruel.
Yeah, like in a way that's not portrayed in the movies, and I think that they had this dropped very much on purpose, because if you saw a grown adult treating kids the way he does in the book, you'd be like, it would seem unreal, because it seems unreal to me at times reading the books, like, because in that moment when her teeth start growing really big, her teeth grow, like they describe it as like down past her chin or something like that. And they say, look, Malfoy cursed Hermione, or he started it or whatever. Look, and points at Hermione, and Snape goes, I see no difference.
Yeah.
Like, fucking, it's a child. That is a child, and you're a grown-ass man. Like, holy Jesus Christ. But yeah, we'll get to it. So anyways, she gets her teeth blown up really big, but then she goes up to Madame Pomfrey, and Madame Pomfrey shrinks them back down, and Hermione, coyly, just lets her go a little further than she was going to, so that she shrinks them, and then they kind of she ends up with like perfect teeth, basically, is the idea, which plays into the whole Yule Ball thing later. This is when we kind of touched on it earlier, but Crumb is not an idiot in the book.
Yeah.
Which he is in the movie, because they even say at one point, like, Moody says, that Crumb's got a head full of sand, but Karkaroff doesn't, and that's not the description.
Yeah, they make him into like a dumb jock.
Yeah, they turn him into a dumb jock, and he's not.
Which is also character assassination, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. And it just simplifies him in a way that's, I don't think, necessary.
No.
And it also makes no sense then that Hermione would be into him, because I don't think if he's just like a dumb jock
Right.
That he's portrayed as in the movie. There's no reason that Hermione would go to the ball with him.
Right, because she really does like him.
She does. I mean, to some extent. Now, she also is like, towards the end of the book, realizes she's not super into him. But, she does like him and then wants to go to the ball with him. And they like, at the ball, they're like in deep conversation together. And they seem to really like each other, at least to some extent. And that wouldn't make any sense in the movie if he's just like a dumb guy.
Right.
Like, Hermione wouldn't go for that. And that's actually how they hit it off and he asks her out, is because they're both in the library all the time. Because Crumb is studying for the Triwizard Tournament all the time. In the first challenge in the movie, Hermione reminds Harry to use his wand. Like, what?
I don't know. Is that supposed to just remind us that he has a wand?
So he's like, yeah, he I guess the idea is that he gets confronted with the dragon and his, like, he just, like, reflexes of, like, survival kick in and he's, like, dodging behind rocks and stuff. But she goes, Harry, your wand. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, wait, what? Because in the book, he knows it's dragons. He knows what he needs to do is summon his firebolt. They've been practicing summoning for like the last week or a couple days or something, basically, to like get it perfected. And so he walks out into the thing, sees the dragon across the arena, and then immediately summons his broom and it sits there like, I hope it's coming. I hope it worked. Which, they just wanted some more action beats in there, which, all right. I don't love, and speaking of the dragon, I don't love the giant. I understand why they added this big set piece with the dragon. It's the first task. It's a dragon. You want to get some mileage out of that. So they have him chase Harry everywhere all over the castle. But I think it's just kind of weird because it like destroys a bunch of the tower and like it's like climbing on the roof, like ripping tiles. And I guess it's magic. They can fix it probably pretty easily.
I actually had that in a different segment.
I know. But
I get what you're saying.
It's just, in the book, I like the very strategic element of what Harry's trying to do. He knows he needs to get the egg. He goes kicks when he gets on his broom. He immediately kicks from like scrambling, like scared mode into like playing Quidditch, basically.
Yeah.
And like is in his element. And he figures out strategically, okay, I need to weave this way and that. Oh, the dragon won't leave its nest. Okay, I'm going to slowly tempt it away by flying around like this. And then as soon as it leaves, I'm going to take off and go grab the egg. The other thing that makes no sense to me is that he gets the dragon, chases him away. Why doesn't he just immediately turn back around and go grab the egg?
I don't know. And there's a couple things like in that scene that like, and then like that doesn't make sense. Like later on when he falls off onto the roof and like he can't reach his broom, and I'm like, why wouldn't you just Accio Firebolt again?
Maybe he doesn't. Did he drop his wand? I don't know. I don't know. But it is fun. Like that's the thing with the. Yeah. It is a fun scene. Like it's thrilling or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. It's action. I get why they did it.
Yeah, but speaking of, does the Hungarian Horntail just die? Yeah, right. In the movie?
Like, does he kill that dragon?
I mean, to be fair, it's not like he killed it. It was chasing him and hit a bridge.
I mean,
and fell into a deep abyss and never to be seen again.
That we know of.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I didn't thought of that the first time, but we were watching that and I was like, did that?
Did the dragon just die?
Did it just die? Because we don't see it again after Harry comes back up from the foggy abyss of the chasm or whatever. But I was like, maybe he killed that dragon. All right, well, that's dark.
Speaking of dangerous beasts.
Yeah, no blast-ended Scroots. That's one where you could have just had them. Just in the background or just something. Just throw them in there for a minute.
They could have put one in the maze, but we'll talk about the maze later.
Oh, boy. But yeah, just put them in there somewhere just for a second. Yeah. They show up in the book so much.
Well, and that's like a conceivable thing where they could have put it in there and it would have been like a thing like for people who hadn't seen the book or hadn't read the book, like, oh, a mythical creature of some sort. But then people who had read it would be like, hey.
Legend of Scrooge, it's cool.
But no.
It's completely not. Well, and we get like very few classes, which I get. The Triwizard Tournament takes up the bulk of the movie.
Yeah.
But like we get none of the Caramagical creatures classes. And since we cut the House Elf Liberation Front, they never visit the kitchens, which I thought was really interesting. And the way the tables or the way the kitchens work with the House Elves, where they have like mirrors of the tables below the Great Hall, and they put the food on the tables below, and then it transports up magically.
Transports up to the tables.
I thought it was neat. And then we also don't get to see Dobby then, which I think is a mistake because I guess do we see him again in 5? Do we not see him again till 6? Because that's the thing. That's the problem. coming back to him,
probably do in the book, but I don't know about the movies.
Well, yeah, sorry, that's what I mean in the movies, because obviously there's the big moment with Dobby in the 6th book or 7th book. Sorry, So I guess he might show up in 6. I don't know. We'll have to see.
I don't know. Yeah,
but
we'll find out.
If we don't see him in any movie up until 7.1 again, I feel like they needed to put him in one of them just to kind of remind us who Dobby is and why we care about Dobby.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's really good because Dobby has a lot of really good, fun character moments with Ron, and with Winky. That's really interesting, and he's also just very endearing in this one. You know, the few times he is, I love Dumbledore basically hires him and gives him a job and pays him at Hogwarts because it's one of the few places that will like pay a house elf if they want it. And he goes, and Dobby says that Dumbledore even says I can insult him. He says I can even call him a barmy old codger if I liked. And it's super adorable the way he like says it, and then he like he feels like naughty about saying it. But it's really like endearing moment.
It's like a little kid saying a swear word.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one of those little things that I think would really add a lot to the emotional punch of when Dobby does ultimately die.
Yeah.
To have a little moment like that. That just makes it's a little thing you remember about Dobby that makes it that much more impactful later. So Nigel isn't a fucking character. Who is Nigel?
It's a generic British name.
So there's a kid in the movie who just shows up and is like wants Harry's autograph at one point and kind of shows up a couple more times. And his name's Nigel and he's in Gryffindor. And now I guess there could be a first year or something named Nigel who we never meet. But just make it the younger Creevy brother.
Yeah.
Why would it not be Dennis Creevy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would it not just be Dennis Creevy? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense.
Right, because you don't necessarily have to reintroduce him. Just have them say Dennis instead of Nigel.
Yeah.
And then it's another little thing
just
for
say Dennis.
book readers.
Like what? I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. It makes no sense. Again, we talked about the Weasley Wizarding Wheezes is what their sort of joke shop is called. But they also have some canary creams, which would have been fun to see at one point, which are probably closest to what we saw in the 3rd film where they like eat the candy and it makes them like roar like little tigers and stuff. Yeah. But this actually turns them into canaries when they eat it.
Right. And like the book completely cuts the whole subplot the movie. Gosh, jeez. Yeah. The movie completely cuts that whole subplot with Fred and George working on their joke shop.
But it does come back in the movies later. We see them open their joke shop.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. But yeah, the setup for that is in this one, which we'll get to even more later.
So there's a really weird moment in the movie where Hagrid is with Madame Maxime.
It's an M, I think.
And she like plucks something out of his beard and eats it.
Yeah. And we don't even know. I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be a bug or food, like leftover food. I don't know. But either way, it's weird.
It was weird. And it was like totally ignored her character because she's supposed to be like very refined.
She's very refined.
She's a lady.
Yes. And in fact, they completely cut the whole subplot with her and her giantess.
With her and Hagrid discussing their partial giant
parentage. And she's very, she doesn't want to admit that she is because of all of the discrimination that giants face and people who are descended from giants face. So she doesn't want to admit it. But Hagrid tells her, my mom was a giant, or part giant. Whatever. And it becomes an important thing later for what happens in the 5th book between the two of them.
Right.
But they just drop that all completely and just kind of leave the romance of their relationship in.
Drop that all, but then they have her eat something out of his beard.
Which is so weird because it's like, it plays up like this weird, like she's like it's an animalistic thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, if that's supposed to be what that is racist.
Yeah, it really is. It is in the sense that like, it's very strange that like, look, she's a giant, she's part giant, so she just fucking picks bugs out.
Yeah, she's like an animal. Ha ha ha.
Get it? It goes against kind of the whole theme.
It goes against like that core message. Of these books. I don't understand this movie.
I don't know, man. I don't know. The Patel twins are in different houses in the books. They're in Padma's in Parvati's in Gryffindor and Padma is in Ravenclaw. But they're just both in Gryffindor, I think, in this.
Or
in the
like
movie
they're
universe.
she's just like hanging out in the wrong common room. I don't know.
Possibly.
This movie just ignores everything that's already been pre-established. So who knows?
Yeah. They even mentioned that in the books at one point because they're talking about, well, like, don't all siblings get into the same house? And they're like, no, the Patel twins ended up in Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, and they're twins, so.
Here's a thing that doesn't make any sense. Rita Skeeter's article about Hermione being like a
scarlet woman, as Ron says.
And like having flirtations with both Harry and Crumb, supposedly. Except that happens in the movie before they go to the ball together.
Yeah.
And before the second task. And I'm like, why would she have printed that point? But because, also, like, nothing ever comes of that in the movie.
No, nothing ever comes of it. Because, she saw, they get the picture of Hermione hugging Harry. And that's like the picture that's on the cover of the story. But there's nothing, we haven't seen at this point anything between Hermione and Crumb.
Yeah, we haven't had any indication of that yet.
No.
At that point in the movie. So it doesn't make any sense.
No. And again, that almost felt like adding something for, I guess, just to have Rita in to some extent. They needed her to have something to do, even though they cut a big chunk of her story too. But the other thing that they cut from that, though, it's a little thing, but I thought was interesting, is that Hermione gets hate mail, which I thought was, she gets hate mail from just like random people who read the story and like send her like undiluted Bobatuber pus and stuff, so she like breaks out
howlers
with, and howlers, and I love too that Mrs. Weasley, even though Mrs. Weasley knows Rita Skeeter is a liar, and like a notorious liar, because she prints a bunch of bullshit about the Ministry. And Miss Weasley, since Arthur works at the Ministry, knows like that's bullshit. She still buys slightly,
and she knows Hermione. She still buys the story about Hermione and Harry and Crumb, because she sends, or there's two elements of it, but one is that she sends them all Easter presents. Yeah,
and she sends Hermione like a tiny little egg, and the rest of them get like giant Easter baskets or whatever. And Hermione's like, your mom doesn't read Rita Skeeter. And then later, because Molly's completely cut from this movie, which is disappointing. I think there's some really important elements in the book that sort of cement her and Harry's relationship that are just completely cut from the movie. But also, when she shows up at the end of the book, she's being very cold to Hermione. And at one point, Harry's like, explains, he's like, you know that was all bullshit, right? And she's like, of course. But then like, she's fine with Hermione after that.
But I think that's an important element too, though, because it kind of shows that even people who know better and who are smart can buy into that
emotionally
kind of bullshit.
Buy into bullshit. Yeah. Fake news, as it were.
It's also topical and relevant.
Topical. Oh my goodness. I like that in the book. So Ron gets the same awful dress robes in the movie in the book, and we see him in the movie. I like in the book that he uses a spell to try to trim off all the lacy parts.
Yeah,
and it's described as like, well, at least it's not lacy now, but it's like kind of tattered and not like he didn't do a good job. Yeah. But I like that moment. I wish they would have shown that without even showing him doing it. Just show him have them on, like try them on, and they're all lacy everywhere. And then when it cuts down and they're at the ball, just without the lace, but they're kind of, you don't even have to show them doing it.
They kind of look like hacked up.
Yeah. I would have liked that, and not even comment on it. Just keep going. And because, again, that's a little thing for book readers. We know what he did. But also, to me, it's a little thing because I thought that moment was such the perfect desperate thing that a 14-year-old going to a dance would do. Like, oh God, I have to do something about this. I'll cut the lace off with like quickly and clumsily cut the, you know what I mean? I just think it's like a perfect, it's a moment where you can tell that J.K. Rowling really understands the mind of teenagers and remembers what that was like. And the movie just doesn't have it at all. And it's like, all right, fine.
So we've made it to the Yule Ball.
Oh God, we're almost halfway done.
Movie-wise, I totally get giving Hermione like a grand entrance.
Yeah, right.
Like she gets an entrance.
She gets in years before it's time. She gets Belle coming down the grand staircase.
Right. And I get it, but I also really enjoy in the book. That they don't even fucking recognize her.
It's a great line where Harry says he saw Crumb come in from the Durmstrang ship with some pretty brunette girl that he didn't recognize. Yeah, and I just think that's a great. They could have done that in the movie and still given her the Belle walking down the steps moment.
Yeah.
They could have just had a moment where we saw him kind of walk through the periphery or something where and she's changed enough where you might not notice, and then I don't know how they would have done it, but I think they could have done it somehow, because it's a great moment in the book that they don't even recognize her. I like this as a little thing, and again, I don't know how they would necessarily incorporate this, but in the book, Dumbledore mentions the Room of Requirement. He doesn't do it by name, but he's at the Yule Ball. He's discussing the castle with somebody. I can't even remember who it is.
He says like he doesn't know all of Hogwarts secrets.
And he says he was looking for a restroom, and he couldn't find, or he really needed to go to the bathroom, and he was going through the halls, and he just stumbled across a room that was nothing but chamber pots.
And then when he tries to go back to find it again, he can't find it. So it's the Room of Requirement before we know what the Room of Requirement is.
Yeah.
Also at the ball, Parvati mentions that she doesn't think Mad Eye Moody's magic eye should be allowed.
Yeah. I agree.
It's...
Because in the book, what happens is Harry got a Christmas present from Dobby that are like silly socks, and Mad Eye comments on his socks through he can see Harry's socks through his robes. He's like, nice socks, Potter. And Parvati's like, that's fucking weird.
It is really weird. Especially in a school with like a bunch of underage
11
kids.
to 17-year-old
it's weird.
Kids. Yeah, I don't disagree. I was like, I hadn't thought about it, but that is fucking weird.
Especially since he's not actually Mad Eye Moody. He's like a
gross creeper dude. 100%. He was just, it's unfortunate. And we talked about Madame Maxine denying her giant heritage in the book, and I think that it was important that they could have somehow included that in the movie at all to just feed more into the themes about non-human bias.
There's enough like weird, like kind of almost mentions of it that I almost feel like there's maybe some stuff that got cut.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Where it was in the movie more, but it ended up being like just kind of a thing that goes nowhere.
Yeah, and so they didn't know what to do with it, and they were like, we'll just cut it for time, and then but they still wanted to leave the whole slight romantic subplot between them in kind of just as lighthearted moments, because that's really all we get is like the little, like we get the weird quirky moments, but we don't get any of the rest of it in the movie, which So this, I didn't notice this. There's a scene where Harry has another dream flashback. I guess it's like he has another nightmare, but it's the same opening scene and in the movie it's Wormtail, Barty Crouch Jr. and Voldemort at the house, and Voldemort in this scene, in this moment, says, "Let me see it again," or something like that. Let me see it again. And Barty Crouch or Wormtail, one of the two, puts out their dark mark, and Voldemort goes, "Ah, yes, the time is close." And again, this is what we talked about earlier. What does the movie think a dark mark is? What is that? 'Cause, okay, try to explain this. So the dark mark is Voldemort's sign that he puts on all of his, or that they put on whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like a magical tattoo.
It's a magical tattoo that all of his followers have, and he can use it to summon them by if he touches it.
Yes,
he can summon them. Like basically calls out to all of them and goes, "Come to this location," wherever he touched it. Basically, is what it seems like. And it's also the sign they shoot into the sky. Yeah. To when they like killed. It's the burning cross.
It's his calling card. Yeah.
It's the burning cross in the parallel to the Ku Klux Klan. But so he sees the dark mark in this scene and goes, "Ah, yes, it's close." I assume what he means is that it's getting darker.
Yeah.
But that relationship is backwards.
He's the one who makes it darker.
Him gaining power and becoming and getting closer to being back is a reason that they're getting darker. And it's not getting darker because it's closer to his time to come. Like that, the movie has that relationship backwards. I had never remembered that line, and it stood out to me so vividly as like, wait a second, that literally makes no you clearly don't understand the rules of what this of what that is, of what's going on here. If you think Voldemort would look at the dark mark and go, "Ah, yes, we're close," like it's some sort of like egg timer, like. Like, what do they think that dark mark is? And again, this comes back later at the end of the movie. Because
there's an even weirder moment at the end of the movie. But yeah, I don't think the movie knows what a dark mark is.
It's so strange. It was so strange. I was like, all right.
There's a whole scene that's missing from the movie where Harry sneaks out at night and he gets stuck in the stairs,
and he drops his egg, and he goes to investigate. It's during the egg scene where he takes the bath.
Yes,
but he goes and investigates. He sees Barty Crouch on the map.
Yes,
in Snape's office, and it's like, well, that's weird because at this point in the book, Barty Crouch hasn't been coming to any of the stuff because he's sick, quote unquote sick. Yes. And so Harry goes to investigate. He ends up dropping the egg. And then Snape almost finds him, and Filch almost finds him, and then they almost find the Marauders map, and then Moody comes out, and it's a big thing, and then Moody gets the Marauders map at the last second, because he can see Harry's under the cloak, and you can see him, and so it's this big thing, and it's like this big tense moment, and I understand why they dropped it, and they also moved this, so this is the corollary of that scene from the third movie, where he sees Wormtail on the map and goes to investigate. They just took the scene from this one and put it in the third one, which he thought was a good addition in the third one. And I don't think it's as necessary here, but I like it. It's a really interesting scene. And the thing I really like about it is that there's a very specific thing about it, is that if the whole events of Voldemort coming back hinge on this one scene, essentially, because Snape bends down to pick up the Marauders map, and Harry's like, no, like waves no to Moody, who's down at the bottom of the stairs, and Moody sees him and accios the map to himself.
Yes.
If that hadn't happened and Snape had picked up the map,
he
immediately realizes what's going on.
He would have seen that Mad-Eye Moody was in fact Barty Crouch Jr.
Or Barty Crouch, and he would have known something was going on, and all of a sudden everything's ruined and Voldemort doesn't come back to life. It's all because Harry didn't hate Snape that much and didn't trust him that much. Which, again, would maybe rightfully so. But
well, rightfully so, but that, I think, also makes it at least partly Snape's fault. Because if
he hadn't been so cruel
to Harry and hadn't set himself up as a villain.
Yeah, as much as he did, then he wouldn't have cared, maybe, or whatever, It wouldn't have. It's a big, important scene. It's a really interesting scene, and it's actually, I guess, never mind. I'm not even going to talk. It's something with the cursed child that I'm not even going to get into. But, yeah, it's an interesting scene. It's not in the movie. And we're on the second task now, at this point.
In the home stretch?
Kind of. Some of the other ones will go real quick. So in the second task, I like that in the book, when Harry's underwater, he can't talk. In the movie, he does. I get why, because you can't hear.
Right, we need the.
In the book, we read
audio.
Harry tried to say this. All that came out was bubbles. You can't do that in the movie, really. So he just gets to talk, fine, whatever. But I like that.
But I also like that in the book, even though it's just bubbles, like his magic still works.
Yeah.
It just
and
like
it shoots
pops
bubbles
out of the bubble.
Yeah, like when he shoots like stuff at like the Grindylows and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it shoots like boiling water at him and stuff. Interesting. And I really don't, and we both have this, the way that the second task ends. So in the book, Harry's time is running out, and he's carrying the two people up to the top, and he's swimming, and all of a sudden he realizes he doesn't have fins anymore, and he realizes his gills are gone, and he starts, like, aspirating water, and it's like, it's this intense thing. He's close to the surface, but he starts feeling like he's drowning, and it's like, he doesn't think he's going to make it, but then he just barely makes it. Like in the last second,
like
gets
he gives it that one last push.
The one last push and breaks the surface of the water and brings in the air, and it's like, oh my god, I didn't fucking drown in this super safe Triwizard tournament that we're doing. I noticed there weren't any rescue divers with them to make sure he didn't drown, because he almost did. But yeah, and so that's what happens in the book, is that he just swims the last 20 feet out of the water, almost drowning, basically.
Makes it by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah. In the movie,
oh my god,
he like pushes Ron and
he like pushes them and like
Gabriel
lets them
float up, to the top, and they break the water, and then he like sinks, and we like, oh no, is Harry Potter gonna drown in the fourth movie? No. I mean, I know obviously that's the same thing we're thinking in the book, but it's just the way they do it in the movie. He just kind of sinks and sits there. And then he remembers, I have a wand, I guess. Which, to be fair, I guess that is one of the things. Why didn't he use his wand in the book? But in the moment he's surviving, he's half drowning. He's just kicking and trying to swim. But he, I don't even know what he does. He uses a spell.
Ascendio?
Ascendio, that's right. and launches himself out of the lake like a dolphin and flops on the...
Flies through the air and flops up onto the dock, and it looks
dumb.
Ridiculous.
It looks really dumb. It's I get, again, you feel like it's this big finish. Like it's the magical climax of the scene. He uses a spell to save himself and barely gets out. But the book is so much more intense.
Yes.
And like interesting.
And I even think that in the movie they could have made him breaking the water like normally a good intense big finish.
You absolutely
it could have done like the Little Mermaid breaking the water and then breathing in air. But no, he launches himself out of the lake like a rocket dolphin.
Yeah, it's really dumb. We talked about it earlier, but Crouch Jr., Barty Crouch Jr., the evil Voldemort's
his most loyal
supporter,
Death Eater,
is the reason Harry Potter becomes an Auror. So there's that. I really like. There's a moment, and we don't get like any of the Care Magical Creatures classes.
Yeah.
But we get a lot of them in the book. We don't get like any in the movie. But it starts out with the Blast-Ended Scroots, and then they go to some other stuff, and everybody thinks Hagrid's like they hate his class. Yeah. Because they hate these Blast-Ended Scroots, and it seems like they're not really learning anything, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And then Grubby Plank, who's this character not in the movie, who's like a sub for Hagrid, after Rita writes a story about blah, 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 a bunch of stuff, Hagrid's like, doesn't come to work for a while, and they have a sub, and the sub starts teaching them about unicorns, and they're like, wow, this is the best class ever. Like, all the kids are like, that was the best Care of Magical Creatures class ever. And then I like there's a moment that when Hagrid comes back, like his first class back, he keeps teaching about unicorns. And J.K. Rowling makes a point to say that they realize that Hagrid knows just as much about unicorns as anybody else. He just thinks they're boring, so he doesn't like teaching about them, which I thought was an important little moment to where it doesn't just seem like Hagrid is inept and like doesn't know what he's doing and somehow gets to keep his job. He's not the best teacher in the world all the time necessarily, but he does know what he's doing. He just is bored by it a lot of times. He likes the monsters. So,
and that's doubly important after the whole subplot of him being part giant. Yeah, to show that he actually is competent.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about the hate mail and all that from earlier, so we'll skip that. There's a little moment that's completely cut from the movie, and I understand why, but they meet Sirius and Hagrid. I think it would have been fun to see Sirius again. He's hanging out with Buckbeak.
They meet him in Hogsmeade.
In Hagrid. That's a whole different fanfic, boys. Let me tell you. Meeting Sirius in Hagrid. But yeah, no, they meet him in Hogsmeade, and they hang out. And this is where he gives a lot of backstory about Crouch and what happened with him and that sort of thing. And also we find out he has a code name, and it's Snuffles. They call him Snuffles, which is adorable. That's Sirius when they're talking about Sirius around other people, they call him Snuffles. The Nifflers would have been fun to see. They're little gold digging creatures,
little like anteater badger type things that dig up gold.
Like moles, kind of, but like cute, and they dig up gold coins, which I thought would have been fun to see. Again, that's little stuff you can cut. I get it. It's it's whatever. This one was a big one because this moment in the movie or in the book is freaking awesome, and I was super disappointed it wasn't in the movie. This happens when Crouch comes out of the woods. Crouch Sr. comes out of the woods and stumbles across. And in the movie, Harry just finds him dead. Right.
In the book, there's a whole scene where he comes up out of the woods and he's like talking nonsense. And they can tell that there's very clearly something wrong with him.
Yeah, and he's like, I gotta warn Dumbledore. It's my fault. He keeps saying, like, it's my fault. I gotta warn him. And he's like, he just keeps saying, like, kind of nonsense, but you can tell that, like, something important's happening. But there's this. Harry goes up and tries to get Dumbledore to come back down. And during that time, somebody ambushes. Well, whatever happens, Crumb gets knocked unconscious, and Barty Crouch Sr. disappears.
Yes.
And, basically, Karkaroff shows up and accuses Dumbledore of lying, or I can't remember exactly what. Oh, so Karkaroff shows up and is very upset that Crumb has been attacked.
Right.
And is basically like, this is treachery, you did this, like, you're trying to take out my champion or whatever like that. And he's like, you talked about international wizarding links and rebuilding old ties, and here's what I think of you. And he spits on the ground at Dumbledore's feet. And the line in the book, Karkaroff spat on the ground at Dumbledore's feet. In one swift movement, Hagrid seized the front of Karkaroff's furs, lifted him into the air, and slammed him against a nearby tree. Apologize, Hagrid snarled at Karkaroff as he gasped for breath.
Hagrid's massive fist at his throat, his feet dangling in midair. And then Dumbledore's like, hey, calm down. But that would have been... There's 2 moments in the movies with Hagrid that they don't show that are so disappointing to me that they aren't... the other one's in the 6th one, which we'll talk about. But they don't ever give... I don't know. I guess he probably does in the 7th one. I just don't remember. The moments where Hagrid, you can see him turn into a fucking beast of a man that he is. And like... But anyways, I thought it would have been really fun to see him slam Karkaroff against the tree. And, with his feet kicking in the air. And just, again, to set up, again, how imposing Hagrid is. Because he's always so friendly and everything. We see him in the movies, And he when he wants to turn it on, like Dumbledore, when it's business mode Hagrid or business mode Dumbledore, you don't want to be on the other end of their wand or fists accordingly. And we just don't really ever get to see that in the movies, which is disappointing. Then we get the pensive scene with the trials, and there's a bunch of trials in the book. We only see one in the movie. They kind of cram it all together. I actually don't hate the change of... Well, we'll talk about it. But I don't hate the change of having Karkaroff name Barty. I think that could be interesting.
I think it was a way to smash it together that made sense.
I don't love the change because... And it's what we talked about earlier where Barty's there and he's like all like... angry and crazy. Like, I don't love that because I like him begging. Because the whole scene where we see it is that eventually Barty Crouch Jr. gets brought in with the Lestranges and like another Death Eater or something, and put on trial for torturing the Longbottoms, which is what they talk about in this trial. But he's like begging and like saying he's innocent the whole time, and his mom is there, and that's what sets up the fact that he insists he's innocent all the way to Azkaban.
Yes,
in the book, Barty Crouch Jr. does. And that's why ultimately Barty Crouch Sr. and his mom decide to try to get him out, or Barty Crouch Sr. at least agrees with the mom. Yeah, we can try to rescue him and get him out.
Smuggle him out. But it makes sense to set up that guilt. Yeah. If that's the plot line they're going with.
Since they don't go with that.
The movie doesn't.
So I think the way they do it's all right. But I hate the cage they put him in. They put him in like an Iron Maiden cage thingy with spikes pointing at him, which is just silly. In the book, it's just a chair with like chains on the arms, and it's actually the same courtroom that Harry gets put in the 5th. Yes. In the beginning of the 5th book / movie, if it's in the movie, I don't remember. Yeah. Another thing that they dropped from the movie, which I think is really disappointing, and it makes sense because of the changes they make to the maze, but again, we'll talk about that here very shortly, is that in the book we see Harry, Hermione, and Ron practice a bunch of spells because they know the third task, they just tell them what it is. They don't have to figure it out. They go, there's going to be a maze. We're going to put the cup in the middle. First person to get the cup wins. There's going to be a bunch of stuff.
There's going to be a bunch of stuff that you have to get past.
Yeah, so they're like, all right, well, we're just going to learn a bunch of different spells. And he learns how to do Impedimenta, which is the slowing spell. He learns how to do Reductor, which he does do in the movie.
Yeah, he does.
Which is like a cutting, blasting kind of spell. He learns a compass spell in the book where he can use his wand as a compass, so that way he can guide himself through the maze, basically. And a few other ones. But anyways, the whole point is that's really important to me for later books because, and I didn't remember this, but that when they do this sort of crash course and they really start learning all this stuff, when we get to Dumbledore's army and everything, that's why they're able to teach them all this stuff because they've learned all this stuff.
That stuff.
Yeah. They didn't just, it didn't just magically all of a sudden they know all these spells, and now they've learned some in class and stuff, but he has sort of had a crash course on a bunch of stuff, and we see more of that in the book than we do in the movie, which is kind of weird because then when you get to it, and it is to the point at some point, which is Harry's whole thing with it in the 5th book, where he's like, why should I teach? I don't know anything. But it's like, no, you actually do. Yeah. And in the movie, it is kind of like, well, what does he know different than anybody else other than how to do a Patronus? The entire Rita Beetle storyline.
Rita being an unregistered animagus gets totally dropped from the movie. Yeah. And I don't remember if she comes back briefly in the 7th book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of the later ones.
I don't think she comes back before that. Maybe she does. But she definitely comes back for at least a minute later on. Yeah. And I don't remember if they have that in the movies or not. If it's relevant.
I would imagine not.
Yeah, probably not.
But it's a fun storyline of Hermione figuring out that she's a beetle because... Yeah. And there's lots of little good clues throughout the book of them hearing beetles buzzing by window or bugs buzzing by windows and little things that set up the fact that... And how Hermione ultimately figures out that Rita can turn into a beetle. That's how she's getting her inside scoops on everything because Dumbledore bans her from the grounds. I really like in the book that Molly and Bill Weasley come as Harry's family for the final task. Yes.
they show up to kind of be there and support him because Harry's not expecting anybody to come because they're like, your family's here. And I don't know why they wouldn't have him because like Amos Diggory comes.
Yeah.
But why
wouldn't they at least show them in the stands?
I guess they don't have to pay Molly for this movie because she's not in it. So that would be my guess as to why they're not there.
We also, though, in that scene in the book, we get the setup for Bill and Fleur.
Yes.
Because they get married later.
Yeah, they get married in the 6th book, or...
Seventh
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, 7th book, I think. And yeah, they're set up because they like Fleur is like staring at Bill, and it's just a little thing. It's not really.
She's into him.
Yeah.
His long hair and his earring.
All right, we're almost done with Better in the Book. It was a marathon. Oh no, wait, no, we're not. We got a lot of work getting there though. All right, so quickly, the entire maze task
is so. Like, in the book, there's all this, like, really cool stuff that happens in the maze.
It's not just a maze that tries to eat you.
Yeah, the movie, it's just a giant creepy maze, which is lame.
Yeah. It's literally just a maze that kind of, like, tries to, like, it moves around and, like, will suck you up and collapse on you. And, like, it's but in the book, there's, like, a sphinx that gives Harry a riddle that he has to solve. There's this weird golden mist that flips the world upside down, and it's like he has to figure out what to do about it. There's the Scroots are in the blast-ended Scroots end up in the maze. There's giant spiders at one point, which is how Harry ends up getting his leg hurt, which I don't think really happens in the movie as much.
I don't think so, no.
But that's why one of the reasons he can't, he has trouble getting away with Voldemort and stuff at the end is his legs like messed up.
His leg is injured.
He can barely stand up. And so they just get rid of all that and just kind of make it a creepy maze. And I guess it makes it a little quicker, but it really wish they would have kept some of the elements of...
Well, they could have at least put some like creatures in there.
Not have the like maybe don't do the Sphinx let's sit and do a riddle thing, but like the blast-ended Scroots could have just come charging. You wouldn't have to know what those are. They're just some creepy giant spider, lobster, scorpion things that shoot fire. Like what? Terrifying. I don't. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the movie really does turn Fleur Delacour into kind of a wimp.
Yeah.
So in the second task in the book, she fails. She gets caught by Grindylow and kind of panics, or I don't know what happens. But she's not able to complete it, which is why Harry saves her sister. But she doesn't in the movie in the third task. She also is like when we see her before Crumb gets her, she's like panicking and freaking out.
Yeah.
And
she wouldn't.
She's not like a panicky mess. Like she has one issue in that task. Something
Yeah.
But like she's not like she's literally just running around in the maze like. And I'm like, oh, okay, come on.
Yeah.
Like she was chosen as a champion for a reason. Like, and also in the movie, so once she gets caught in the book, they send up red sparks.
Yeah.
In the book, those sparks hang there. From my understanding, from what it seemed like to me, they hang in this air over the spot that they are. So that way the people on the outside can come in and find whoever needs to be.
Yeah.
In the movie, he shoots it up like it's like a firework. It goes off and goes away. And I'm like, well,
how are they going
to find it? I hope they got the exact position that went when they know the exact position where that went up in the air. I mean, I guess you can just say magic, but yeah, I always imagine them kind of hanging in the air like a firework that like is constantly going off or something like that, which also would look cool. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. They dropped this, which doesn't make any sense. Crumb Crucio Cedric in the movie.
Yeah.
Imperioed Crumb.
Right, he's under the
Imperious Curse.
Of the Imperious Curse.
And also, Cedric isn't a dick in the maze in the book. Like in the movie, he's like, he like is gonna like after he gets Crumb off or whatever, he's like gonna like do something. I don't know. He's got his wand pointing at him, and Harry like grabs him and stops him. But, like, that is not how that transaction goes down.
Yeah, Cedric is, like, a super upstanding
Yeah, he's in Hufflepuff. That's the whole point. Like, he's like, the purest and nicest of the people. Like, he's not, like... And then when they're, like, fighting, trying to get to the cup, kind of, they're, like, racing and they're, like, they're, like, pushing each other a little bit. And then ultimately end up taking it together. It just plays out in the movie a way... that I felt very different from the book. In the book, obviously, there's the elements because, like, they get grabbed by spiders and, like, there's all kinds of other stuff. And, like, Harry saves them from a spider and whatnot. All this other stuff happens. But the way it plays out in the book feels much more natural and much more in line with both of their characters.
Yes.
And then they spend, like, 5 minutes arguing that the other person should take the cup in the book.
Yes.
They're like, no, you take it. No, you take it. Well, I wouldn't have got past the first task if it wasn't for you. Well, I wouldn't have got past the second task if it wasn't for you. Shut up and kiss already. I'm sure that fanfic exists where the portkey takes him to like a snowy villa.
Oh my God.
And just embrace for hours. So this is another problem I had in the movie. Wormtail's not nearly whimpery enough.
Yeah. Wormtail is like the ultimate coward.
Yes. He is the ultimate coward in the books. And in the movie, he goes about his task way too easily.
And confidently
of bringing Voldemort back.
Yeah.
And they also describe in the book numerous times about how repulsed he is by Voldemort's like little gross baby form.
He's supposed to be like terrified.
Yeah. And like the book, he spends that whole scene like whimpering and like moaning and laying on the ground in the fetal position. And in the book or in the movie, he's just like kind of fine. Like he's like not excited about cutting his hand off, but like he's kind of fine. And that is so like it just does.
He also in the movie, and I commented on this while we were watching it. He throws creepy Voldemort in there with aplomb.
He just flips him into the
floop.
Yeah. Whereas in the movie, he very much, or in the book, he very much gingerly drops him into the.
It's very apparent in the book that he doesn't really want much to be touching Voldemort.
Yeah.
He's not super into it. He's there, but he's not super into it.
He's there because he's a coward. That is literally it. And they make that clear numerous times. And I say it in the movie too, but it just doesn't come across the same way. But there's one line missing from the final confrontation between Voldemort and Harry that I think is a really good line in the book because it kind of illustrates... I don't know. I just think it's a good line for Voldemort to say. I just really like it. Is when they're dueling and he tells Harry to bow and Harry won't bow. And then he makes him, which he does in the movie, but the line in the book is Voldemort says, "Bow to death, Harry," which is like a really fucking badass thing to say. I mean,
it is.
Like evil badass thing to say.
And it's also a cool hint at like what's to come with the Deathly Hallows and like Voldemort trying to become the master of death.
Yeah. It's a great line, and it's really disappointing that they didn't have it in the movie because it's such a little like he says bow like 4 times. Just say bow to death. Like why wasn't there anybody?
They had to have him weirdly stick out his tongue in Harry's face instead.
Yeah, I guess it's just like why would you not have him say that? It's such a great line. Okay, and then so all this stuff happens, and we'll talk about that a little more later. Where they duel quote unquote duel. They cast Harry goes to the old standard Expelliarmus and their wands connect, and then it causes Priori Incantatem, which if you're not a book reader you would have no idea what that means when Dumbledore says it later, and all of the spells that Voldemort has cast start coming back from the wand. And now in the movie that is represented as just the people,
right, just the people he's killed
come out, and so Cedric comes out, then Fred the caretaker comes out, and then Harry's parents. And we don't see Bertha.
Bertha Jorkins
because she's not in the movie, so she doesn't. She's in the
book.
So she would come out. She comes out in the book, and then his parents come out.
Yeah.
But also along with that, because it's not just people you've killed; it's every spell you've cast. So and I didn't notice this before, but you hear the screams of every time he's cast Crucio. Mm-hmm. You hear screams for that. You see Wormtail's hand come out because he makes the hand for Wormtail. And then there's another time or two where Crucio happens and something else. So you see or hear every spell, which I think they could have done really quickly and easily. Mm-hmm. That would have kept in with what the spell actually, or what is actually happening. It's not a big change. I just thought it was kind of weird that they would change that. I guess people might find it more confusing. Whereas if it's just like the souls of the dead coming back, sure, like that kind of colloquially makes sense to people.
Yeah. So the scene immediately after Harry gets back to the Hogwarts grounds, it's fine. I'm not sure it quite captures like the utter confusion, but
I have this in a different segment, but I do agree that it doesn't capture the confusion.
Yeah.
Because that's the big part in the book, is that it's like Harry's like completely out of it and like drained, and it's like half unconscious.
Yeah.
And so because we're getting it from Harry's perspective to some extent, it is very confusing and we don't know what's going on. I like some of what the movie does, and we'll talk about it here soon. But yeah, it definitely doesn't capture the Harry's perspective of the confusion and the slipping in and out of consciousness and just the random noises and screams that he's getting. They could have done that. They could have done it from a Harry's perspective where the sound and the visuals keep going in and out. Would have been really interesting. Yeah. But I like what they did, and we'll talk about why. They mentioned the faux glass earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. Very explicitly, Moody says that's a faux glass, and I couldn't remember if they were going to include it in the movie, and I'm like, oh, they did, cool. So I was waiting for the end of the movie, but then they don't follow up on it. So what the faux glass is it lets you see your villain or your enemies or whatever. And in the book, when Dumbledore and Snape and McGonagall come and rescue Harry, they blast through the door and knock out Moody/Crouch, and then you see them in the faux glass because they're obviously...
Right, thus revealing that his foes are actually...
Yes, the good guys, quote unquote. And I was like, so why would you set up the faux glass? It's in the room they're in the movie when this happens, but they don't have a single shot of... Yeah.
They set it up, but they don't pay it off.
It makes no sense. It's so easy to have a quick shot of the faux glass with the three of them in it, and they just don't do it. It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Speaking of cool things that Moody has, though, I didn't like the changes they made to his magical trunk. Because in the book, it has like a bunch of different keyholes. And like every time you open it, it's different stuff.
Whereas this is just one big.
Yeah, this is just.
It's like levels, but it's
like levels and like rises up. And I was like, I get it, but that's dumb.
Yeah, it's not as interesting. Okay, so this is the big one where we said, what does the movie think this means? So there's a moment where after they reveal Barty Crouch and I like this, and we'll talk about it, but he hasn't been taking his polyjuice potion, so he just transforms back in the movie into Barty Crouch in that scene. And they're talking to him and they're interviewing him, and he pulls out his dark mark and he says, "I'll show you yours if you show me.
I'll show you mine.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours." And we both thought the same thing.
I thought he was going to be talking to Snape.
Because he knows Snape's a Death Eater.
Yeah.
He knows Snape has a dark mark. Would make sense. So that's what I thought too. So he pulls his out and shows it. And then Dumbledore grabs Harry's arm and pulls it down.
And like shows him the cut.
The cut where Wormtail cut him to get the blood.
Yeah.
To bring back Voldemort. Now... I guess the idea was just that, like, visually they're in the same place in the movie, but that was just because you chose to put them in the same place. In the book, it's described as the crook of Harry's arm, which I either assume is the elbow or, like, the shoulder. I'm not exactly sure which it would be.
I think the elbow.
Right.
Yeah.
That would have been what I thought. But, so, the cut on his arm literally has nothing to do with the dark mark.
Zero things.
Like, nothing to do with it. At all.
I
mean, other than the sense that Voldemort is now alive and the dark mark is completely dark or whatever, filled in because Voldemort's back, and that's because of Harry's blood. But the location on the arm and the fact that the cut, nothing to do with the dark mark.
Well, and it just goes on to further reiterate our point. Like, what does the movie think the dark mark is?
Yeah.
What do they think it is? What do they think it does? I don't think they know.
No. I don't think so either. And I also think that maybe it was just one thing where they felt like some point during the process, somebody had the clever idea of going, oh, he should cut him on the arm in the place where the dark mark is. Because, like, visual symbolism. And, like, sure.
Sure, yeah.
I
don't have a problem with that.
But then, like, this moment where they're like, ha-ha. I'm like, but that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. It's irrelevant. Like, I like Dumbledore in this last scene, but I don't think we get quite enough. I don't think it's quite portrayed business. Try to explain this. In the book, this is the first moment that we get full-on business Dumbledore of like, this is what, because Harry says like, I understand why people said that it's the only wizard that Voldemort ever feared when Dumbledore comes through that door and stuns Moody.
Yeah,
Harry's like, oh, I get it. Like this, he's like describes him as like radiating this energy and like just. Super intense and powerful, and we get that in the movie, and it comes across, but it doesn't. It just didn't hit me in the way that. Here's what they should have done, and I'll explain it, and everybody will agree with me. I'm dead serious. In the book, it really hit me of like that was the first time you're like. Yeah, like Harry, you're seeing it for the first time of why everybody fears. Literally, everybody fears Dumbledore in this not in the same way they fear Voldemort, but people do in the sense that he is that powerful. We finally see it in the book. We kind of get it. He does a thing like he stuns him, and he's intimidating to some extent. But what they should have done, and this came out years after, I think. You remember that moment in Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf, in the very beginning of the movie, Bilbo decides he doesn't want to give Gandalf the ring back.
Yeah.
And he goes, Bilbo Baggins, do not take me for a conjurer of cheap trick, or whatever the fuck he says. And it the universe swirls around him, and the camera pulls back, and he looks 9 feet fucking tall, and there's like electricity, and it's like crazy. They should have done something like, not that, but like that.
Yeah, they should have done some kind of visual trick to make him look.
Because the way it is described about the energy, and you can feel it in the room, they needed to do something to portray that, and they just don't quite get there. It's like, okay, but it's not like because that moment in Lord of the Rings, you're like, oh shit, like Gandalf is serious. Like he could mess stuff up if he wanted to, and I wanted to feel that in this moment with Dumbledore, and it just doesn't quite get there. So they should have talked to Peter Jackson. That's my point. Oh, okay, and we got to wrap this up because we got to get on other stuff. But so they cut the whole thing with Fudge.
Yes.
The whole debacle with Fudge. In the book, there's a whole thing where Fudge doesn't believe any of this.
Right. He is being willfully ignorant. Another thing that's really relevant right now.
Yep. Willfully ignorant. He does not want to buy that the fascists are back.
He does not want it to be
believe
true.
that they're, and so he just refuses to believe it. And Dumbledore's like, all right. And there's a big argument between them, and this is sort of the parting of the ways, as they call it. And Dumbledore literally says that to Fudge. He goes, this is the parting of the ways then. It's also important that in the book, Crouch gets his soul sucked out by a Dementor, which we don't see in the movie. That's important in the book because then Crouch can't testify to what has happened.
So Fudge can go on saying, oh, he's just a madman. He's a madman. He acted all on his own. Voldemort's
he's
not
dead
back.
now. I don't have to deal. Yeah. It's just he was a lone crazy guy. Again, relevant. But and so they cut that out completely. And that sets up the entire conflict. Well, one of the big conflicts for the next 3 books. Yeah. Between
and
the
especially
ministry,
the fifth book.
Especially the 5th book, between the Ministry and Dumbledore and all of the Order.
Yes.
So it's a really big point to not address. Now, from what I remember, they set this all up at the beginning of the 5th movie. Kind of like they kind of quickly try to set this all up at the beginning of the 5th movie instead of doing it here at the end of the 4th. I guess they wanted more of a neat bow on the 4th movie, like the end, like instead of setting up but again, we talked about in the prequel episode, that's kind of the whole point.
Yes.
That we don't get clean endings anymore. We get more conflict, which is disappointing. Also, there's a great moment in the book, and it's a little thing, but I really wish they would have included it because it's illustrative of how planned out everything J.K. Rowling does and how she does such a good job with little elements to set up future elements. There's a moment where Harry tells Dumbledore that Voldemort used his blood in the spell that brought him back to life. And Harry says, I was looking at him when I said this, and I thought I saw what looked like a small flash of, it says like victory or triumph flash across Dumbledore's face, but then he thought I must have been imagining it because it was gone the next moment. Not imagining it, that's a very important thing, and this also sets up the whole idea that Dumbledore is thinking 8 stages ahead and is kind of manipulating everything.
He's the grand chess master.
He's the grand chess master. It kind of starts setting that up in this book, and we don't get that in this one. It just still kind of feels like, the old headmaster is just kind of like there. Yeah. Also, they don't mention that Harry and Voldemort have wands with the same core from Fawkes, and I mean that's a little thing, but it's kind of important. That's the whole reason the Priori Incantatem happened.
Yeah, that's the reason it happened.
Was because they share same cores, basically. Yeah. And again, in the movie, it makes no sense. He goes, "Ooh, Priori." Dumbledore's like, "Oh, so what happened?" And Harry explains what happened in the graveyard. He's like, "Priori Incantatem," and then the scene ends.
Nothing.
And I'm like, if I was a movie watcher, I would be like, "What?"
Oh, I absolutely cannot imagine trying to follow this movie having not read the book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like Priori who's a what now? What? What does that mean? What? Okay, cool, thanks. I guess we're moving on. right on. And then there's a couple little things. Ron gets Crumb's autograph in the book, which is fun because it's kind of been a running gag or recurring thing. He really wants his autograph, but just has never... He also doesn't want to fanboy over him too much. Also, they hex the shit out of Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle on the train, which I thought was fun in the book, which would have been fun to see. That's not how they wanted to end it. I get it. But they just like all hit him with like, because they're being truly terrible. They're like, Malfoy says something about like, somebody dying and is like making fun of Cedric dying, basically. And they all just hex him at the same time, including Fred and George, who are in the hallway of the train. So they get hit with like 20 spells at once, and they're described as like a mess of like tentacles and like other stuff. It's kind of fun. And then the Triwizard Tournament winnings never come up in the movie. Yeah. But Harry gets 1,000 galleons.
Harry wins a buttload of money.
Yeah. And he doesn't want it. He tries to give it to, like, everybody.
Yeah.
He tries to give it to the Diggories. He tries to give it to, I think, Molly Weasley. He tries to give it to a bunch of different people. Nobody will take it. And ultimately, he gives it to Fred and George so they can start their joke shop. Because of the recurring, the running theme, or not theme, the subplot of them and Ludo Bagman. Right. They lost all their money to Ludo betting, and that's all cut. But he gives them their money so they can start their joke shop. Woo!
I can promise you guys that our other segments are going to be much shorter.
So much shorter.
So much shorter.
Let's get into Muggle Questions Part 2. 2 hours in. All right. We're sorry. This is probably the worst movie, though. So hopefully it better be.
We'll see how it goes.
At least with 7, it's 2 movies, so it won't be quite as bad. All right. Here's Trevor's 5th question.
I really need help with this one. Why is the Triwizard Tournament a thing in the first place? Why would you subject students to these very dangerous tasks where students have actually died, all in the name of sport?
We think it's basically just like the Olympics.
Yeah, it's like Wizard Olympics.
Yeah.
Magical cooperation, international friendship
Dumbledore
making.
says it a couple times in the movie. He says it more in the book.
Also, everybody gets to show off.
Yeah, it's the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's the exact same idea, basically.
I found it curious, why did the ceiling freak out when Mad-Eye walked into the room? Obviously, we now know it's not Mad-Eye. Spoiler alert. Did the ceiling know?
As for the ceiling with Mad-Eye, it doesn't happen in the book.
Mm-hmm. It is already storming in the book, and there's happens to be a big clap of thunder when he walks in, but...
It's just like a dramatic entrance for him, but he doesn't use his wand to fix the sky or whatever. As did the ceiling know it was Mad-Eye? Maybe. That's an interesting idea. I actually don't hate that, or know that it wasn't Mad-Eye, rather. I don't hate that idea that Hogwarts might have some sort of magic to kind of be like, what the fuck? This is not... What? That's a fun idea. So I hadn't heard that. I think that's a clever potential...
Yeah, that's like a clever explanation for that.
But yeah, it's not in the book, so...
So Crumb is the best seeker in Quidditch, but he's also a student at a school? How old is he?
Crumb's like 17.
17, 18.
He's like a senior. He's in his final year.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when professional baseball players get drafted right out of high school, basically, is kind of the idea there.
So he's been drafted, but he's finishing up his
Well, and actually, no, because, but it's actually not even, because he's not playing professionally. He's playing for the country team, which is different, because a lot of those, like if you like the World Cup and soccer and stuff, and where it's like teams competing, like the Olympics is all like kids, not kids, but like 18-year-olds, you know what I mean? So like the World Cup of Quidditch would make sense that it would be like juniors, like not professional players, potentially.
How does the Goblet of Fire choose a champion? Does it have qualifications that it's looking for? The answer to this may just be magic.
Magic.
Yeah, I say that's the best answer we get for this.
Magic. It's like the Sorting Hat, where it's just like, it looks at like, it kind of picks...
It looks deep into your soul and knows that you're worthy.
Yeah, or you're not. So there you go. Let's do it better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
When Harry walks into the magical tent and he says, I love magic.
I could go both ways on that one. It's a little cheesy, but it's fun.
A little cheesy, but I like that moment.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And that is the exact reaction that I would have to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So this isn't really a better in the movie, but I thought this fit the most for it. And we talked about it a little bit, but I understand why they changed the incredibly complicated Dark Mark chapter and the thing with Winky and the wand and all that stuff. And I think, looking back, watching it a second time, having just reread the book, I think they did it in a way that makes about as much sense as you could if you're going to do it in one movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because the book has a million different plot lines and red herrings and all this different stuff. And it's all great and it's all important.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to have to lose some of it.
If you're going to do it in one movie, this is the way they did it in the movie is probably makes the most sense of having Barty Crouch just be also there helping Voldemort in that scene at the beginning with Wormtail, and then kind of setting that up, and then him just being the one to cast the dark mark, and it streamlines it and it kind of works, I think.
We mentioned earlier that the movie makes Beauxbatons an all-girls school and Durmstrang an all-boys school. It's not really a necessary change, but I think it makes sense, even just for like simplicity's sake.
Yep.
Because we don't meet any of the characters other than Fleur and Crumb.
Yeah.
So like having them all kind of be visually similar is really helpful.
Yep.
Also, I really dig the Durmstrang boys entrance. I'm into it.
They're just doing gymnastics down the hallway. Yeah, I thought it was fine. I like the fire part. That's cool, where you guys shoots the fire dragon. That part was pretty cool. The rest of it is whatever. They're a little try-hardy for my taste, but it's fine. I prefer the way Karkaroff looks in the movie.
I'll agree with that.
He's described in the book as having short white hair, and I think he's a little more imposing and evil looking. He looks like
in The Princess Bride.
Oh, Inigo Montoya?
No,
Count Rugen?
Yeah, he looks kind of like Count Rugen.
Count Rugen's got the curly or like the short bobby hair.
But
he's got like long.
He looks like an evil Eastern European version of Count Rugen.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I just like the little goatee and the long dark hair, and he just kind of looks. I mean, it's probably racist in some way, but he just looks more of the villain than a guy with short white hair. I mean, they could have done it. I just think he looks cool. And I think the guy does a good job in the movie, too. So. I like that they make Moody drinking the Polyjuice potion a slightly more deliberate thing.
Yeah.
And that he seems to do... He has, like, almost like a
tremor?
Tremor when he needs to take his Polyjuice potion. In the book, it mentions that he always only drinks from his flask, and that's what they talk about.
That's part of what makes his disguise so brilliant in the book, is that Moody is well known for only drinking out of his flask.
Right, but we never get any sort of implication in the book that, like, there's no description of him, like, where he's, like, kind of, like, transforming back almost, and then he takes his Polyjuice in the movie, which happens in the movie, which I think is a good visual clue for the
it is a good visual clue, and it's also kind of a good red herring, because if you don't know that plot twist, you might think, oh, he's like an alcoholic,
right
and he needs his alcohol fix,
right but I think that's a clever thing, and it helps set up the twist a little better. I really like... Oh, go ahead.
We both had a note about this. The telephone scene where Hermione's like, Ron told me to tell you that Dean said that... Hermione said that Hagrid was looking for you.
Yeah.
Our cats just broke something. I thought it was funny, and I thought it fit for their age group.
I agree. I thought it was a really fun scene. And it's during that time where Ron and Harry aren't talking to each other, which... so in the movie, Ron knows about the dragons because Charlie is there, with the dragons, basically kind of keeping...
Yeah, Charlie is a dragon handler, which I don't think we ever actually learned.
Yeah, I don't know if we learned that in the movies, but we learn about it several times in the books. And so he's there with the dragons, and so it kind of makes sense that somehow Ron finds out about that, and Ron thus knows about the dragons. But in the movie, he doesn't tell Harry.
Right, he doesn't tell him directly.
He says he did, but even that I don't think makes sense in the movie.
Yeah.
Because if he says, well, actually, I told you, because ultimately he says, no, I did tell you about the dragons, because Harry's like, why didn't you tell me about the dragons? He's like, oh, I did, because Ron tells blah, blah, blah. He goes through the whole thing, and he goes, well, actually, Seamus never said that, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but then Hagrid still would have had to tell you, like, Hagrid would have been the one.
Yeah, because Hagrid knew, like, Hagrid was expecting
Harry.
So Ron, like, still, there is an extra level of betrayal there.
I don't know. It didn't really make sense to me, but I thought it was interesting to have him know and not tell. But they kind of go back on that. But whatever. I like the quick moment in Moody's office where you see the chest in the movie and it shakes.
Yeah.
And you hear a noise and he's like, I don't want to tell you about that. It just fits with Moody's character or with fake Moody's character. And it also is just another hint that something's going on. The chest is mentioned in the book, but it's never, there's not like, and then it shook and made a weird noise. Like,
you did not really care for the part where the dragon breaks its chain and chases Harry around for a bit. I thought that was kind of a good ad. I think it makes the scene more action-y.
I agree. Like I said, it's fun. It's just
it's fun.
I have issues with it.
And this movie does drag a little.
Yeah.
So I think having like a kind of an action-y scene in there was good.
Yeah, not a bad idea.
And then we both had a note about the dancing lessons with Professor McGonagall.
Yep.
Not in the book.
It's not in the book, but it's a fun scene, and McGonagall is fun in it. And I think that the other thing I like about that scene is that Neville really takes to it, and I think that's a fun little character moment for Neville. And then they see him dancing in the room, and it kind of makes sense because he's very clumsy, he's very awkward, and he's not very good at anything. And I think it's an interesting idea that he would take to dancing. I think it's kind of a fun idea that kind of fits in his character in that sort of unexpected way. Like Neville likes to,
Yeah.
That was a fun idea.
Snape we're going to discuss at length later on in another episode.
Yeah.
But I did kind of enjoy, there's a bit with him where he's like making Ron and Harry study.
Yeah,
during
it's
study
kind of
hall.
slapsticky.
It's kind of slapsticky. Yeah, it's visual humor.
We'll see if that was the extent of his shenanigans with them. I'd be like, fine.
I'd be like, sure. You're just an old-fashioned teacher.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to this.
And it works better, like, just in the movie because we don't see him being super cruel.
Yeah, I agree.
At the Yule Ball, I never noticed this before, all the Beau Battens girls are wearing, like, little tiaras, which I felt like was really on point.
But yeah, it definitely fits. I like the design of the golden egg in the movie. In the book, you don't know what it looks like, but it's kind of described as just having hinges. Like and I imagined, I don't remember the exact description, but I think it basically is described as just like opens in half like a book kind of.
Yeah.
And in the movie, it's got like a cool release on top, and then it like opens up like a flower, and like it's really cool looking on the inside. I thought that was a cool design. This is a big change, but I don't like dropping Dobby, but I think you still could have had Dobby and still made this change, and it still would have made a lot of sense. And that's having Neville just give Harry the gillyweed.
Yeah. It's a lot less convoluted, for sure.
And it gives Neville something to do, because he doesn't have a lot to do. He doesn't even have a lot to do in these early books, honestly, other than just kind of be the punching bag to some extent. And I think it's when I was rereading the book, I had in my head that Neville helps him and gives it to him because it just made so much sense to me.
Yeah, especially it makes sense.
They set up early in the book that Moody gives him the book with the gillyweed in it, basically. And it's like, yeah, just have Neville do it. Gives Neville something to do, give him a victory. It all ties it. It makes perfect sense.
And we also then get to have the line
it's great.
Where Harry falls into the lake initially.
Yeah.
And he's like not coming back up, and Neville's like, oh my God, I've killed Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's a great little fun line. And it's a really good change. I really love that he has a leg holster for his wand.
Yeah,
in the
that's
movie.
a neat touch.
It makes a lot of sense because it's like, and it's drawing inspiration from the real world where like divers will keep a knife on like a leg holster thing. And it just makes a lot of sense because I think in the book it's described as like pulling his wand out of his robes or whatever he's wearing. And I'm like, it just makes no sense. Like, again, with like the earlier book, it's like I stuck the wand in my t-shirt and I'm like, where? You would just get a holster for your wand. Like, that seems like a very obvious thing that wizards would have.
You would think.
Yeah. But anyways. Because they always just keep them in their pockets, and I'm like, how big are your pockets? These wands are a foot long normally, or like 8 to 12 inches long on average.
They're big.
They need wand holsters. That's like the one big thing of her universe building that J.K. left out.
I bet that American wizards
would have
wand holsters.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. That is, it's a cultural thing. To be fair.
Yeah.
To be fair. In the movie, I think there's actually a pretty good... Oh, sorry. I skipped
one. I was going to say, I liked that they had the hostages on, like, suspended chains.
Like floating
underwater,
because in the book, they're tied to rocks.
They're tied to, like, a statue or something. So the floating chains thing, that's a cool visual.
Yeah, it's real creepy. I think there's a chance in the movie that if you're smart and paying attention, you could actually figure out that Moody was Crouch.
Yes.
Mainly because they give him that visual tongue flick.
Yeah, the little tongue flicky flick lizard thing.
Which is on its own isn't my favorite thing in the world.
It's a choice.
It's not my
capital C.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but I like the idea that they gave him some sort of visual clue that you could figure out.
Right.
That it was, because in the book, I would argue that I'm not sure on a first read that anybody would ever suspect that Moody, I don't want to say nobody, but there's very subtle, the clues are very subtle.
Yes.
In the book, whereas it's a little more obvious in the movie. And again, I think it's still, most people wouldn't put it together, but you could, I think, a little more easily put it together, which I think is interesting. I like that, at least.
So we talked about how disappointing the hedge in the third task was, but I did like that the hedge magically closed around Harry. Not the fact that it like moves around necessarily, just like that initial shot of him looking back at the crowd and it like closes up around him.
I agree. The movie drops the entire, because this is a thing that most of these books are guilty of, which is the villain monologue, let me explain everything. And now the movie drops that, because in the book, Voldemort monologues for like 2 pages or more to all the Death Eaters and Harry about his entire plan.
He monologues forever.
Forever.
And then Crouch monologues.
And then when we get to Moody,
forever.
fake Crouch, he monologues forever. And it's just like, there's like literally 10 combined pages of them explaining what has happened over the last year, basically.
And I mentioned in the prequel episode, that was one of the main criticisms that people had of this book when it came out.
And it's definitely, so the movie drops that, which is nice for me as a book reader, in that I don't need that again. And now it flows a lot better. It's not nearly as exposition-y. But I'm like, my only thought so I like it, but my only thought is, does this make any sense if you haven't read the book? Like, does any of this, do you understand what happened here if you haven't read the book? Now, it is simpler. Like, the overall story is much more simple than it is presented in the book. So maybe I could buy that. Our cat is chasing a fly around our studio. So it's a good change. I like that they dropped all that, because I don't need it, but I don't know if other people did. Trevor seemed to at least mostly understand it. He didn't really ask many questions about that. So 2 more things for better in the movie, and then we'll move along to Muggle Questions again. I really like the way the wands connecting looks in the movie.
Yes.
Like when they hit, the spells hit, and it's like plasma dripping down. It looks awesome.
It does.
It looks really cool. I also like that they decide not to have them float up in the air. In the book, what is the point of that in the book?
There's not really, like, it says that they float away from like the graveyard, so I guess the implication.
But he still floats close enough to Cedric's body. They don't float that far, because the Death Eaters walk over and come back around him, and he can still run to the Cedric's body and the cup.
I don't know, and that's probably one of those things that like they kind of pushed this book out fairly quickly. Yeah. Just something that got missed in editing.
Yeah, I just thought it didn't make... Maybe there was a reason she needed it in her first draft, and then it got left in somehow.
That got dropped, and then this got left in. Who knows?
I don't know. But anyway, so... Because in the book, they like float up in the air and float like 20 feet away and then come back down. And I'm like, why? What? All right. So they don't do that, which I thought was a good idea. The only thing I don't like about this in the movie is, in the book, it's very clear that at one point... these like golden beads, as they're described, appear on the connection between the wands, and they start getting pushed back and forth between them. And if they get as they get closer to Harry's wand, his wand starts shaking more. So then he tries to push him away, and we get this idea that it's and he starts talking, or he starts vocalizing inner vocalizing how he needs to concentrate super hard, and he realizes the most important thing he could ever possibly do is push that bead at the end into Voldemort's wand. Yeah. And so it's like this battle of wills, and I don't feel like we see that play out. We don't see the beads. Right. But they keep it as the red versus the green, which is fine, I think, in the movie. But I still don't feel like we get that moment of like Harry like mustering his will.
Like
and
everything he has within himself.
Yeah, and forcing that, it just kind of happens. Like, it just kind of, and then they all start coming out. Whereas in the book, it's like, he concentrates and makes it happen, and then when the wand gets hit with the spell, that's when the priori incantatum happens. But yeah, that's the only criticism of it, but it looks really cool apart from that. Like, it looks amazing. And then my final one is that, and you had this in your better in the book, when we get back out of, when he comes back with Cedric's body and lands back at the maze or outside the maze. Mm-hmm. I think they do a really good job in the movie of us getting to see everybody's reaction. And again, this is a change because in the book we're getting Harry's perspective and he's like out of it and like half unconscious and, you know, he's going in and out of consciousness. But in the movie we see Amos react. We kind of hear it a little in the book. We hear screams and whatnot, but like in the movie, we really see Amos react to this. And everybody else, you see lots of shots of like everybody, like Harry and Ron, or Hermione and Ron in the crowd and the Weasley, and everybody just sort of reacting to this. And it just hit a lot harder to me, the sort of emotional impact of Cedric's death and how it affected, because we actually see it, the reaction on Amos Diggory. It just hit me harder than just sort of like, because we don't get that in the book. Right. Like, it's just, like you said, it's more confusion, less like seeing people's reaction. Yeah. And I thought it hit pretty hard in the movie. And I thought they did a good job with it. So.
No, I agree with that. And something else small that I liked in the movie about that scene was that the band is playing.
Yeah, when they get back,
a triumphant.
Like, yeah.
And it's such a contrast.
Yeah. And then it like fades out. Like, yeah, I agree. It was a really smart idea. All right, that was the end of Better in the Movie.
See, we told you it'd be shorter.
Much shorter. Muggle Questions, Part 3.
What would the consequences have been? What would have happened if Harry just decided to not compete in the tournament? If he just forfeited? Can Harry forfeit? Is that even a thing?
Unclear. We don't...
we talked about this. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yeah. We were just trying to figure this out ourselves. This is a question I had.
Yeah, they say in the book, Dumbledore says that entering the tournament is a magically binding contract, but we don't really get any insight on what that means.
And what would happen.
Yeah, like what would happen if he forfeited or if he simply refused to participate. Yeah. It's kind of a conceit that we have to buy into in order to have the story.
Yeah, he just has to compete. Yeah. Don't ask questions. Like, that's kind of what it is. Because, I was like, what if he just, I'll compete, and then gets to every task and just quit, like just doesn't, because you can fail, like Floor in the second task like fails really early.
He could have just like waded into the lake and then been like,
nope, oh well, couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, we don't know what. Yeah. But you gotta. It's magic.
How can Harry dream about Voldemort? Like see him in his dreams? How does that work?
It's a big spoiler for the series going forward.
Big old spoiler.
So it will be addressed in the future, as you in your little preamble to your questions every time. If it's coming in the future, let me know. This is one of those ones that we'll find out about in the future.
Does the book explain better why Krum asked Hermione to the dance? I mean, she's smart, she's pretty. He could obviously see the pretty. I don't think he'd appreciate the smart as much. Did they go into any other motives behind that?
I would say that movie Krum probably wouldn't be interested in Hermione.
Yeah.
Book Krum, as we discussed a little bit, is pretty smart.
Yeah.
And he's actually a pretty decent guy.
He is. He's very clearly set apart from Karkaroff and some of the other Durmstrang students in that. Because they mentioned that they actually teach, supposedly, I think it's Malfoy says this, so who knows if it's true, but they say they actually teach the dark arts at Durmstrang. Unlike the Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts. But it's very clear over the course of the book that Krum doesn't fit into that same mold. But they do play up the idea that Durmstrang as a whole is kind of like Slytherin.
They're
it's like the Slytherin, because they sit at the Slytherin table in the book,
mm-hmm.
and they're kind of like, it's like if the whole school was Slytherin, kind of, is the idea.
I'm probably going to butcher her name. Fleur? Maybe? Would her sister have died in the second task if Harry hadn't saved her?
No, Gabrielle Delacour, I guess is her name. Gabrielle Delacour. She would not have died. Harry finds out afterwards that the hostages were never in danger, and he's like, "Oh, duh."
Yeah, he feels real dumb.
Yeah. All right, time for the movie. Nailed it.
Nailed it.
The campground.
Yeah, we both have this.
That's the World Cup, the magic tent.
Yeah.
We're on the inside.
I like as they're walking through the campground, I think it does a pretty good job of portraying that same feeling you got reading the book of the raucous wizard gathering and like all these different, it's just so many sights and sounds and people on brooms and, you know.
And some of them are trying to blend in with the Muggles and some of them don't care.
Yeah. I wish there was a little bit more of them and maybe there is, but there's so much going on you just can't really see it, of wizards trying to dress like Muggles clumsily, because that's some great moments in the book of people wearing like kilts with like dressing gown, like just ridiculous combinations of Muggle clothes. And that probably is in that scene, but there's so much happening that you can't really focus on any of it.
There's one really funny part where there's a wizard wearing like a woman's nightgown.
Yes, a woman's nightgown.
And he insists that it's Muggle wear because he bought it in a Muggle shop.
Yeah, and they're like, a Muggle, and the two ministry wizards are like, no, for women, it was a woman's Muggle shop. This dude's just woke, all right? Doesn't confine to your gender norms. Get out of here, ministry. I think Moody's good. I think, well, it's not Moody, but he's playing Moody essentially, and the same actor plays Moody in the future movies. And I think he does a pretty good job. Yeah. And I actually like that he comes across in the movie to me a little more unstable and like mean slightly than he does in the book. And to me that makes sense because it is Barty Crouch Jr. and not Mad Eye. So I thought that was pretty good.
I would have loved to see more of the Durmstrang ship, but I did think it looked pretty cool coming up out of the lake.
Yeah, and we don't see any of it in the inside of it in the book, or any of it described. But we only see it very briefly in the movie. Yeah. So. I think the Unforgivable curse scene with Moody is pretty much a spot-on adaptation from the book, other than the spider flying around, which it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but. I think overall, apart from that, they hit all the really important moments, and I think Moody does a good job with it, and everybody does. And like it's like most of it's like word for word from the book. So the goblet looks cool, looks great. The names coming out of it look cool, and I like the way they kind of just fly to Dumbledore's hand, which is kind of how it was. Like he just reaches up and grabs them out of the air in the book, and it's the same thing happening in the movie. I also like that it's a little touch, but that the paper they all use is slightly different. Yeah. It's a little thing, but like Floors is like a doily type of thing. Like
super fancy.
Yeah.
I thought Rita Skeeter was well cast. She did a good job.
Yeah.
We have some questions about her quick quotes quill.
Yeah.
How much writing is she even doing? Or is it the quill?
On rereading this, I was like, so how much? Yeah, is she
like, is the quill like attached to her mind,
like conscious?
Somehow?
Yeah, and it's like it's basically dictating her thoughts, or to some extent, or is it literally like writing itself? Because that wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean. And she's kind of just asking the questions, and if that's the case, like anybody could be a writer as long as you ask. How much is
her, and how much is the quill? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think they nail the broom closet scene at the weighing of the wands, where she drags him into a closet, and Harry's like, "Why are we in a closet?" It is, it's pretty much spot on from the book. The owlry, I think it's a little dumb that the owlry is like really far away from the castle. I guess it makes sense. Some extent, but I always imagined that the owlry was just one of the high towers.
Yeah, I think it is one of the towers.
Whereas in the movie, it's like a separate building, like a football field away from the castle.
Yeah,
which fine, whatever. But the inside of it, to me, was adequately covered in bird droppings as to reflect the book, because it's mentioned in the book that the floor is like slick because there's so much bird shit on the floor.
Nasty.
And in the movie, it is covered everywhere. It's just. Covered.
I wouldn't even walk in there.
No, I'd be like, you can come out here, Hedwig. I'm right down here. You can come pick up my letter. They have they bring back the brown suit and the yellow tie, which
for Hagrid,
which is mentioned in the book that he wears to impress Madame Maxime,
and he also tries to comb and grease his hair.
Yeah. And in I don't know if they do this, but in the movie, because it's hard to tell, but in the book they describe that he has like broken pieces of comb in his hair because he's that untamable. His hair is
such
that untamable.
a wild mane.
Yeah. I like that. I have the Malfoy ferret scene in the movie nailed it, mainly because I think McGonagall's reaction and Maggie Smith's portrayal of McGonagall's reaction is so spot on to what I imagined from and I think Maggie Smith in general is just a perfect McGonagall, but her reaction to Moody doing this is exactly how I imagined it in the book, and just her utter bewilderment that like just everything about the scene, other than some little things here and there, I think is perfect from the movie or from the book. I like that they included the faux glass.
Yeah, they set it up and don't pay it off. They just don't pay it off, like we said. But,
I'm just glad it was at least mentioned. I guess, but whatever.
I love the tiny little dragons.
Yes, I have that as well.
I want one.
They look amazing.
Teeny little dragon.
Yeah, and I imagine it's like the same idea, the same spell or whatever that they use for the Crumb, little miniature Crumb statue. I like to imagine it's the same thing. I love the scene where he asks out Cho, and I think Harry or Daniel Radcliffe nails the delivery of Harry saying, "Do you want to go ball with me?" Because he's so nervous that he just kind of blurts it all out at once. And it's mentioned in the book that she doesn't understand him, and it's written in the book as one word of "Do you want to go ball with me?" I thought that was done really well in the movie. And also Ron asks out Fleur Delacour because it doesn't really make as much sense in the movie because she's not Vila. And in the book, he's entranced by her and just without even realizing it asks her. And they kind of play it that way in the movie too. But yeah, they don't set up their other half of it. But I think his reaction and everybody talking about it afterwards is really spot on from how it is in the book.
Hermione's response to Ron realizing that she's a girl is word for word from the book. And Emma Watson's delivery is spot on.
Yeah. Oh, well spotted. We mentioned it earlier, but Ron's awful dress robes, they kind of are
adequately
awful and clash with his hair appropriately and have the lace and everything. Again, wish they would have done the trimming, but the robes themselves look pretty great. The prefect's bathroom, we both had this one. It's exactly how I imagine. It's sort of like a Roman bathhouse, but with a million taps. The only thing I wish the movie had done is that in the book we have the description of the taps and bouncing, arcing off the tops of the waters and just more magical, the
there's
bubbles and the soaps.
There's a million different kinds of bubbles in the book.
And they all do really interesting things. Yeah. And there's only, they describe 3 or 4 of them, but I wish we really just see a bunch of bubbles in the movie.
Right.
I get it. It's not a super important scene and it would cost a lot to do that, but it would have been cool. I like that Myrtle is included in the movie, and she still has the hots for Harry, of course. Makes sense.
The effects of the gillyweed.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty spot on. Where he gets everything, he gets the
grows gills and
webbed hands and feet, and looks pretty good. And the Mermaid Village, I think the whole second task, other than the part where he jumps out, is pretty much. It's probably the most successful of the 3 tasks in translating what I imagined. Because you even get I assume those are Grindylows at the end.
Yeah, I think they are.
They look different than I imagined, but I imagined they were Grindylows. And so you even get that element, the attack from the book. So I think that was the closest of the tasks from the book. And I really like the way the Mermaid Village looks with all the seaweed and stuff growing on the buildings and everything. I just thought it looked really cool. And we mentioned earlier, but the Voldemort rebirth scene at the end, other than Wormtail and his performance, which I thought should have been more cowering, more whimpering, miserable.
Yeah, more cowardly overall. Yeah. But aside from that, rebirth scene was pretty
really good. Yeah, really, really good. And all the stuff with the Death Eaters and everything, he mentions Goyle and Crabbe and McNair and all the important ones.
Malfoy, whose hood does not hide his hair.
Does not quite cover that golden flowing white mane. So a really good scene. And then Business Dumbledore, we finally get to see it again. We talked about it earlier. I wish there was more of it, or that he was more intimidating in the movie. But you get to see it finally, and he gets down to business for a minute. All right, that was it for the movie. Nailed it. We got our final Muggle questions. Then we're gonna hit some general discussion, and we're gonna wrap this up because this was an epic journey, and I still have to edit this before I go to bed.
So did Dumbledore know Crouch Jr. was posing as Mad-Eye? And if he didn't, when exactly did he figure it out?
No.
No. He figures it out when Moody immediately takes Harry away from him after the 3rd task.
Because he knows the real Moody would.
The real Mad-Eye Moody would never have done that.
This one I completely missed. I don't understand how it happened. But in the movie, at the 3rd task, Dumbledore says Cedric and Harry are tied for first going into the last round. I know Harry got second in the 2nd challenge, but they didn't say anything about the 1st challenge. How did that go?
So the movie doesn't really address this element clearly, but after each of the first 2 tasks, they're all awarded points.
In the book, yeah.
Again, kind of similar to the Olympics, where we drew that analogy earlier.
And all the judges it's the 3 headmasters, Dumbledore, Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, then it's Barty Crouch, and then Ludo Bagman, who's not in the movie, is the other judge. So there's 5 judges, and they each give points out of 10. For this first one.
So Harry and Cedric are tied for first based on those points.
Yeah.
Were the spirits of Voldemort's victims trapped inside his wand, or was that some other kind of projection of magic?
Priori Incantatem is a spell that reveals what the last spell is performed by a wand in reverse order. So they weren't spirit. This is what we talked about, how would you possibly understand what Priori Incantatem is,
and
or what happened?
Clearly, you can't.
No, you can't. I don't think. Yeah, and also, it's not that the souls or the spirits were trapped in the wand or anything. It was a different like you said, different projection of magic. It is, it just recaps whatever the last spells performed by the wand in order. And like I said, in the book, we see every spell, not just people that have died.
Yeah, so it's more like it causes the ghost of a spell to come out, not the ghost of the people he killed, really.
Yeah, and this is set up in the beginning of the book where when the Mos Maudra, the Dark Mark, appears in the sky over the Quidditch World Cup, or after the Quidditch World Cup, they find Harry's wand, which in the book was what was used to cast it. It's complicated, but they find Harry's wand, and you can actually just use Priori Incantatem on a wand.
Yeah, to see what the last spell is.
And they do that, and then the Dark Mark comes out, and so they go, oh, this was the wand that we've used. So that sets it up for later. So we know what Priori Incantatem is. The way it happens with Harry and Voldemort is as a result of their wands sharing the same, or a core with phoenix feathers from the same phoenix, so they don't work against each other. And when they come into contact or conflict against each other, they cause Priori Incantatem to happen. Why that happens is not really explained. It's sort of just because magic, but that's what happens. So there you go. It's complicated.
Why did Tom Riddle's gravestone have a death date?
And this was a question I had when rereading for the first chapter.
Yeah, and I explained it to you 5 different ways.
Yeah.
Voldemort is Tom Riddle Jr.
I knew this.
So the grave is for Tom Riddle Sr., his father.
Yeah. All right, that was it for Muggle Questions. Thank you, Trevor. Great job as always. Actually, better job than ever before. You had so many great questions. Not that you were doing a bad job before, but this is...
As always, thank you, Brian and Katie, for having me on This Film Is Lit. I hope my Muggle questions were ponderous and satisfactory. If you're looking for a new podcast, might I suggest one of my podcasts, the KCMQ Morning Shag Best Of podcast, my radio show, condensed into the best bits of the week, talking pop culture, trying to be funny, sometimes succeeding. You can download the KCMQ Morning Shag Best Of podcast on your podcast app, or you can listen to it now, kcmq.com. Thanks, guys.
So we just have a couple things for general discussion that I think we would like to bring up.
Yep.
The beginning of this movie is like all info being thrown at you all the time. It's like being hit with info water balloons.
Yep.
Like, we're here, and now we're here, and now we're here, and now we're here. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot going on. And that gets even worse in later movies. I remember with like 7 and 7.2 or whatever. Oh boy, you move around a lot. And if you haven't read the books, it is hard to keep up. This is a question I had in general. Do the Beauxbatons, and I'm going to call them Beauxbatons, and Durmstrang students go to classes? We never see them in any classes in the books, do we?
The books...
But they like live and stay on the boat and the carriage. They like come in for meals and then like go back. So maybe they take like private classes with their headmasters on their thing.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's only like a select group of older students, they're probably all doing like independent study essentially.
Stuff. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. We just never see them do it in the book or the movie, and I was like, I guess they're going to classes.
But speaking of which, it always kind of bothered me that they made the age limit 17, because that's got to be basically no one.
We see it's like 10 people at each school.
It's like one grade level at Hogwarts. It's the 7th year, the last year.
Yeah.
And as we see with like Fred and George, a lot of them aren't even 17 yet.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It seems odd.
It is odd. But yeah, they... I guess it's because he didn't want Fred and George. Well, but I don't know. Or she didn't. I don't know. Yeah, it seems like, to me, 6th year on up. Yeah. Or like 16 would have made more sense, maybe. Mm-hmm. But whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
It's just, it's not a very big pool.
So here's a plot hole.
Oh, this is a big one. You got her.
They say in both the book and the movie that the Imperious Curse has given the Ministry a lot of grief because they had they
can't sort out.
Yeah, they can't sort out who was acting of their own volition and who was under the Imperious Curse after Voldemort falls.
Yeah.
But why would that be an issue when Veritaserum exists?
Yeah.
Truth potion.
So that's a legit plot hole. Now, I guess you could make the argument that it would be either cost prohibitive or a violation of
well, I mean, I think they
some sort of wizard law to force all these people to take Veritaserum, but
I think they could explain it away a couple different ways. I mean, and maybe it has been in some of the extra lore that she's written, because I haven't read much of that.
But yeah,
so it's possible. But I mean, they could have said that maybe the plant that it's made from is really rare, or it's really expensive to make, or maybe it's not an effective answer for that because you would only tell the truth about what you were doing, but you can't testify to how you felt about it.
I could see that there might be, but I agree that seems potentially a problem.
Yeah.
Potentially a problem. So they say this is the safe. This is the safe Triwizard Tournament, and they're gonna make sure nobody dies this time, right? Okay. I kind of buy it with the second and third task. Yeah. In the third task, there are people going around the outside of the maze, and you shoot up sparks, and they'll come. Right. Whatever.
And the second task, we learn at the end that the mer people are actually pretty friendly.
They're friendly enough, and they're not going to hurt. And the Grindylows are not a big threat. You'd be fine. Floor gets away and is fine. Yeah. And so, but the first one, there is zero way that could have possibly been safe. It takes
dragons are set up as one of the most dangerous creatures.
Yeah. And your task is to go next to one.
Yeah.
All it takes is you messing up for half a second.
And you are toast.
You're eaten by being on fire. I can even buy more as they could do something about if it eats you. If the dragon bites you in half.
Chomp.
They're done. You're dead. I don't think they can fix that in the wizard world. You're dead.
This is a super safe Triwizard Tournament.
I said, second, third task, okay, sure, maybe. But the first task, 0% chance. And in the movie, it's swinging around its tail. If that one tail one time hit Harry and impales him through the chest with its spiky tail, he's dead. That first one, no way. There's just no way you could have made that safe.
So, Cedric's clue.
Yeah. He, to me, Harry's frustrated and annoyed at Cedric, and it's for a lot of complicated, angsty teen reasons. But, one of the reasons he says in the book a lot is that he's aggravated that Cedric's clue he's I told him exactly what was coming. It was dragons. He's frustrated with Cedric's clue, but Cedric's clue is literally what it is in the movie too. Is just take your egg, go, and he's winking at him the whole time. He's go take a bath with it and mull it over in the water. He could not more clearly say, hey, put it underwater.
Yeah.
To me, it seems super obvious, and it was just really annoying that Harry's oh, stupid Cedric didn't even give me a good clue. Told you what to do without doing it. Okay. And this is a big problem. We were talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
This is my problem. I have a problem with the wizarding world in general. And now it's a little less of a problem for a couple reasons. And one is that these books take place in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. Two, we know technology doesn't work around magic or whatever. It makes
it makes it go haywire.
So you can't Google. I'll accept that they can't Google things, but we've discussed before the idea of card catalogs not being a crazy thing. They exist and would exist within the universe of the books. And why wouldn't wizards use? Of course, they would use some sort of card catalog system for their library. And Hogwarts has this huge library. I don't understand how it's so impossible and such a hard task for the champions to like figuring out what the challenge is or whatever. Sure, fine. Like, you know,
right. But then figuring out how to breathe underwater for an hour seems be a pretty
trivial to me.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a pretty easy thing for them to find.
Or at least figuring out how to do it. Maybe if you want to say like the actual learning how to do the spell is hard.
It's difficult.
Sure. But like the whole like Harry, Hermione, and Ron spend like a week, I don't know, several days in the library and can't find anything. It even says they
enlist the help of the librarian. Yeah. Who would fucking know?
I absolutely know at least something. It just blows my mind. And now I guess the idea is that the world of magic is just so expansive that you couldn't possibly know. But like it just, especially too, on top of that, like, so here's the thing. They can't find the bubblehead charm. Like, they don't come across the bubblehead charm at any point for some reason, which is what Cedric and Fleur use. So two other champions come across this, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione and the librarian for like a week don't come up with this at any point.
Right, and it would have made way more sense if, like, that was, say, a really advanced piece of magic, and Harry tries it, and he tries it, and he can't get it.
So then he has to come up with a different thing. Yeah. And if he keeps trying it, and he just can't do it, and then he gets rescued by Neville at the last minute with the gillyweed. Yes. Sure. Like, that makes more sense. But, like, just they never come up with anything, and it's like, what books are you looking in?
I mean, it's kind of similar to this idea that we just have to accept that he is obligated to participate in the Triwizard Tournament. It's a conceit that we have to go along with. Yeah. You've heard the phrase "suspend your disbelief."
Yes, obviously, yes.
You've heard me say it, at least. And you know, I think that's a phrase that's often misunderstood. And when people say it, they're thinking about like, oh, suspend your disbelief. Dragons exist.
Right.
But that's not really what it means.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complicated topic. But yeah. To me, it's different because to me, this is more of the I can deal with dragons existing as long as your rules within your universe make sense. To me, this is borders on rules within the universe not making sense of just. And this is this is the only book where this ever really happens to me. Like, because this is the only one where they're like desperately researching to find. I mean, it happens when they're like 11 looking for the Sorcerer's Stone, but that's a little different. Like, I can forgive that more. This one, it's like 3 14-year-olds in a library for 4 days can't find a single book that has anything about how to. And again, it's if they had tried stuff and couldn't do it, sure. It's just.
No, I don't disagree. I think there were better ways to do that.
And also, just on the same line, it bothers me that none of the other champions or anybody else knew what gillyweed was. So there's this magic plant out there
that makes you
turn into a fish. And none of them thought about it or knew to look it up for this challenge where you have to breathe underwater for an hour. Oh, by the way, gillyweed works for an hour. Like, it just, I don't know. I just had some problems with that. It's like, come on.
And and there could have been better ways to do that too. They could have set up gillyweed as something really rare.
Yeah.
Or she could have set up herbology as kind of a branch of magic that gets dismissed.
And I think that is the idea. I think the implication is sort of like nobody cares about herbology. Yeah. It's like the Hufflepuff class. It's taught by the Hufflepuff. You know what I mean? I think that's
the Hufflepuff of magic branches.
It really is. It's not flashy. Like, it's not,
Yeah. It's very practical kind of magic.
And it's not, And so I think that is the implication, is that it's sort of not taken as seriously, or people aren't looking, they're looking to transfiguration and charms and that sort of thing for their, like, I got to do something. So I get that to some extent, but still, there's a plant that turns you into a fish for an hour-long underwater challenge, and nobody knows about it except for Neville Longbottom. Like, all right. Cool. And this was a big problem, too, with the book that is slightly rectified in the movie, but not really. The second two challenges, the second and third challenges, are terrible spectator challenges.
Yeah. They just sit and watch the lake for an hour.
Yeah, they sit and stare at the top of a lake for an hour, and they all come down to watch it. And I'm like, you're not... I mean, it's exciting when they come out at the end, like, who won, I guess. But, like, yeah, they can't see anything. And so this is the weird thing, too, that this is a problem in the book, a really big problem that I have with the book when I was reading it, is that with the third task, it seems the implication in the book is that because it's on the maze is on the Quidditch field in the book. That's not really where it is in the movie. It's like way bigger in the movie.
Yeah.
But it's on the Quidditch field, and the idea is that the people, what I assumed, and it's never really explained, was that everybody was going to go sit in the Quidditch stands way up in the air, so then they can look down. They can
look down, and they can watch them all running
into
around
the maze.
Down in there.
Yeah, and it's like watching like a Pac-Man or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's what I imagined, and that's what made sense. I was like, oh, then I can watch it and see what happens. But we never describe if that is what happens in the book, and it can't be. Because here's the thing, it can't be the case. What happens in the movie actually makes more sense, that they just sit at the edge of the maze and stare at a maze wall for like that, which again is stupid, but it makes sense at least that they can't see what's going on in the maze. Yeah. Because in the book, if they're up watching from above and can see in the maze, nobody stops it or intervenes. None of the teachers, Dumbledore, nobody intervenes when they watch Crucio.
Yeah.
Victor Crumb or Cedric or knock out Fleur Delacour. Like nobody does anything, so they can't be watching. They can't be.
Yeah.
Or else something would happen. So
right, because this is the super safe Triwizard tournament.
I guess. Well, let him play. I guess I don't know. Crucio that he really wants to win. I guess it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So they can't be watching. And I never thought about that before, and especially too because Moody is like clearing the way for Harry is what happens in the book. He's like clearing obstacles out for him and stuff. And if they would be seeing that happening, it's a problem.
You would think it's a problem.
It's a bit of a problem.
It's a problem.
But you just kind of wave it away and go, sure, fine.
Yeah.
And so the movie way actually, like I said, makes sense that they just can't see. It's dumb. Why would you stare at a hedge wall for an hour? But sure, it makes sense at least. All right, let's.
I know. I just have one more thing that I wanted to mention. The mermaids, when they're singing, they sound like Celtic women.
Yeah, I know.
I noticed this in the movie, but then later on, like when he's actually in the lake, they just sound like street demons.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe their singing voices are just nice. I don't know.
I don't know. I have one more thing, and not the Snape thing. So this is in the book only, and I have to know this. This is a question I always had in the book, because that every time Harry's talking or any dialogue happens, when somebody's looking for a word, they say It's written as in the book, E-R. Harry will be like, Sirius, I'm whatever. And I always read, I was like, I guess, is that how like you write Like, because if we're looking for, in America, if we're looking for a word, generally, it's or It's not Usually, I've never.
I don't know. Do British people say
That's my question
instead of
It has to be, because here's why. In the book, when the Sphinx does the riddle,
yes,
the riddle, one of the components of the riddle is the sound you make when you're looking for the next word. And the sound that is in the riddle answer is ER, for spider.
Yeah, so we would have come up with spider. Spider.
Spida. I mean, Spida. I would get there, I guess. But but he very clearly says and I was so confused. I'm like, so wait, they actually say So if we have any British listeners, if you made it to the 3-hour mark, please let us know. Do you say instead of or Because Americans generally say or
Yeah, I don't know anyone who says
I don't know anybody who goes I don't know. Anyways, that I just had to know, because that blew my mind as a little kid. Like, wait.
Yeah. Okay. So please let us know if you've made it this far.
All right, let's final verdict before we die.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
We were going to give it to the book. We were always going to give it to the book.
Yeah, this one's the clearest case so far.
Yeah, this movie was a mess.
The movie's a bit of a mess. It still has its moments. It's still kind of fun. I think they did about as, I say this truly, about as good as you could do with some part, like as a whole with the story and combining it all into a movie. I think they did about as good as you could do on broad strokes. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of little issues with the Dark Mark stuff and just little rule breakings that don't make sense. A lot
of issues, I think, with not fully understanding the source material.
Yeah, I agree. And so that's the stuff that's more annoying on the rewatch than it is
the dragon breaks free and flies all over Hogwarts. It's like, I can live with that. There's bigger, and getting rid of Winky, that's its own problem with the whole house elf thing. But getting rid of getting rid of Ludo Bagman. Yeah. That sucks as a book reader. Would have been fun to see Ludo Bagman, but I get it. Like, he's not that important. To the overall story.
Fundamentally misunderstanding what a dark mark is.
Yeah, and how it interacts with other things and what it means to Voldemort and how, it's just, that's the stuff where it's like, wait a second.
Where, like, it makes you feel like you didn't read the source material, did you?
Yeah. How clearly JK couldn't have been too involved with this one or something. Like, how did that stuff get by? It's very strange. Unless we're just wrong about everything. I don't think so.
Could be.
I don't think so. That's gonna do it. 3 hours.
So real
better be
quick,
the longest one.
Next, for the next episode, the next 2 episodes technically, because we'll have a prequel and a main episode, we are taking a short breather from Harry Potter to give both of us more time to read the behemoth that is Order of the Phoenix. Because we kind of moved through this one at a breakneck pace, and I don't want to do it again. No. So we're going to take a little bit of a breather, and we are going to talk about Banned Books Week and Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah. So it's a nice short read for you.
It's a nice little 3-minute read.
Yep. Yeah, Where the Wild Things Are. Look out for that. The prequel episode. Might have a talk about a movie or something. I don't know if we go see something. We're talking about banned books too, so we'll see. Yeah. And then, then we'll get back into Order of the Phoenix 3 weeks from now with the prequel, and then a month from now with the actual episode. Like I said, we're a little bit of breather. Break up Harry a little bit here. We've been on a Harry Potter binge, and we need some time to read that 5th one because it's a monster. Until next time, keep reading books, keep watching movies, and keep being awesome.